Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Shadow and Sun Show, and welcome back to another one-on-one tonight. I'm talking with my good friend Omen about the 1981.
You mean 1991?
Was it 91? I could have
Yeah.
sworn it said 81. I'm like, there's no way this came out when I was 14.
No.
1991, Darksun, TSR. I'm about halfway through the. This is actually the box set, all in one, hardback volume. What's up, nerd? I really like this format. I know it takes out some of the like the maps are all in here and the flip books are in here and what have you. But to keep things really nice and safe for posterity, I don't know when this was actually printed by Drive Through or even by who it was printed, whether or not it was Drive Through or Lulu or something like that. But that is going to last a whole lot longer than any of the box sets that I own. This will still be kicking. My box sets have been crushed and rotted away to wherever things go when they rot.
I'm going to bring this up as I know really it doesn't matter until you get to the maps, but if you can find the PDF, then all you have to do is print out the PDF into a big
map.
Sure. And then you just roll it up, or you get it laminated. You just roll it up, and it's good for posterity. So,
and I actually have the mini version, the box set that's only about this big.
Yeah, I saw that.
I can take I can use that map and enlarge it or whatever. Provided I'm actually going to run Darksun, which Omen here is going to try and convince me why it would be a good idea to run Darksun. I have a lot of issues with it, but there's a lot of things I like about it.
You know what though is, whenever I hear people talk about how deadly it is, I'm like, it's deadly, but is it really any deadlier than when you used to play? If you played by the rules without the optional basic set, your characters were going to die from the easiest swing. That doesn't happen, Jillian Darksun. It's just you have to understand that. You can't get out there and say, "Oh, I'm going to go fight" just because you're third level. It's like, yeah, your armor class will let you get hit several times. That said, though, and I was just bringing this up because we were discussing some of these things, and I said, okay, like you're supposed to start off with 4 characters with a character tree.
Mm-hmm.
When one of the characters goes up in level, you can create one of the other ones in that character tree up a level along with them, as long as the current character is more advanced than when you're leveling, then there isn't a problem. So I thought that was pretty cool. So I thought that was nice. And the other part is I know you're talking about how dangerous it is. Your character's basic rules, and on page 2, and I don't know if you want to look at the book here, but I'll do this, but it's 44 6 times. I'm sorry, it's 44 plus 4 6 times for each ability score. So on average, your character's going to have 14, and it's a lot higher to get those higher numbers. Okay, I'm going to get an 18. Yeah, an 18 means a lot more. Well, it's not a lot more, but it's a lot easier than anyone else. I mean, when you start adding that in there, I was just doing some practice characters, and I got an 18 on my first one. That may not be in strength. And then with Constitution, not most players, but your odds of getting that Constitution bonus are fairly high. So you can get an extra 2 hit points, which may not seem like a huge deal until you start getting that magic user. And you and I know both how squishy magic users are.
Absolutely.
And 3 to 6 hit points, and then you start off at 3rd level. That makes a big difference. Now, if you multi-class, then I believe it's 2nd level at your highest, and then you figure out from there. So
I thought it was you had basically like 3,500 XP to split somehow. Because what if you wanted to run a triple class character? Then you're 1st level. Sorry, maybe you could be.
I don't think it's based off of experience. Looking at it, and I may have to double check on this, but I thought that when it says multi-class, that it was that you start at 2nd level at the most expensive one.
I just remember reading 3,500 XP. No show tomorrow, Hungar, or do you want me to just host it on my channel and tell Shadwell and yourself to meet me over there? I got the day off and Jackie's here, so whatever you guys want to do. Now, you mentioned armor class. That's actually not an issue for me. Because that just means everything's a little bit more leveled, and the likelihood of you bumping into someone with a higher armor class is less likely.
You're right. I mean, there are certain monsters, but I guess what I'm looking at is when you get into a fight, you're going to get hit more often than you would normally. So now so you start looking at it. You're not going to generally die from the first blow, but all of a sudden you're going to go, it's time to run, guys. You're not going to say, well, you know what? I don't think he'll hit me for this. You're just like, I'm out of here because he probably has an extra. He almost let's assume if you normally have an armor class of 4. In Darksun, you'll probably have an armor class of 6. That 10% difference may not seem huge, but that
I would see. Well, I suppose leather or padded, and a shield could be pretty common and not too detrimental. But I'm telling you, leather is not something you want to wear out in the hot freaking sun. I mean, unless that's what you wore like every day ever since you were a wee lad or lass, then leather's probably not the way to go. Most people, that's one of the biggest things I don't like about it. I live in the desert, and I know how hard it is to do a lot in the hot sun on a regular daily basis. That to me just not only reeks of difficulty, but it's just going to reek everywhere you go. If you think about it, people are just going to be stinky masses of humanity everywhere you go. And it's not that there's no metal, L. It's just metal is really, really, really hard to come by. And I know that unless your weapon is literally a one-piece bone or wooden or what was it, onyx, I think it was.
Well, there's obsidian. They've got
other than wrapping the handle with leather. Not only is the stuff going to break like all the freaking time, but it even just like using it, if it's like a 2-piece weapon, like a bone with a crossbone hilt or something like that, that leather is just gonna rot away real quick.
So I mean, I have friends that do some of this Neolithic stuff. Actually, it doesn't go away that quickly as you think it would. Well, and you also have to remember
where are they living and doing it? If they're doing it in Death Valley, that would be a different test than doing it in Oregon.
Well, that's true, but remember the Darksun, and so you're kind of assuming it's in Death Valley more than it is in Oregon. But the other point is that my friend talks about rawhide and everything else. Is what little water you would have, you would do that, and you take it out, and it shrinks, and so it gets very, very tight. Now, I'm not saying now. The other part is, and I do like about this, where the weapons break. If you look at how the weapon breaks are, it only breaks if you hit and then you do maximum damage. So let's say that you are rolling we'll just say like an equivalent axe, okay? And let's say it does a D6. When you hit the monster and it does 6 points of damage, then you're looking at it breaking. I
don't remember the exact rules on breakage. Like, okay, so you do that, then what do? Does it just automatically break? Or if you roll max damage, it breaks.
Which means in a couple of cases you either want multiple weapons, or there's a skill in here which talks about improvised weapon, and you can pick up the improvised weapon. And to be fair on this, again, this is why, and I know that we're talking about different technologies, but when you start getting these technologies, then what you're going to do is you're going to look at it and say, well, I'm going to always carry 2 weapons with me, or because they're relatively cheap. Copper pieces are the equivalent of gold pieces in the game for non-metal items. And so it's not that it's that expensive for a lot of players to get these things. Okay, I got a few copper, and then they have where you can break the copper up into a tenth of a copper. Mm-hmm. Or I'm sorry, they call them, ceramic pieces is what they call them, ceramic pieces in here. But CP, so we all understand that. But those are the things that I look at. But we have the Galt site about 30 miles away from me. I saw a guy, which was what would really happen, is your character or someone would have a, what is it called? But where they have the rock, and then they chip it off to make new spear points and things. Mm-hmm. And that's the way that I would look at it. It's like, hey, look, my weapon broke. We survived the fight. Here, give me about 30 minutes to, break it off, and then we'll repair it. So it's not like your normal sword of, your sword's broken and the only way to get it, you have to get reforged. It's kind of like, all right, your weapons are kind of intended to look like they're disposable. And I like that. There's, historically, that's what happens with Neolithic and that's why I'm trying to mention the Neolithic for anyone who has insurance. That's the Stone Age. That's kind of what's there. And there is steel, and this is the other part that I do like about it, is the steel specifically, that's supposed to be like you imagine. You're like, oh my God, I found the steel sword. And I know you play a more high-powered game than I do, and this is why Darksun really attracted me, was I did it up to 40th level for a party, and they had everything under the sun, +6 armor, +6 shield, +6 swords. And I said, oh, this sucks. And as soon as Darksun came in, I was like, guess what? You're going to have to fight for it. It's a little bit more desperate.
Even though I do run some pretty high stuff, I really don't like go that route a lot of times. Now, it depends on which campaign. But real quick, I want to say hey to everybody who's in here, because a couple people just popped in. Justin, Raven, obviously Hungar, Full Metal Dragon, and L. Everybody, welcome to the show. If you guys
is Full Metal Dragon new? Because I know just about everybody else.
I've seen Full Metal actually around a bit. If you guys have any actual questions for us about it, let us know, because I'm not an expert, but a lot of it's fresh in my mind.
Okay, so one other thing, we were talking about multi-class characters, going back to the beginning. This is what it says. Player characters who are multi-class start adventuring in the campaign at different levels. The class begins with just enough experience to be second level in the most expensive class. So you're always at least 2, but I'm not sure some of the class, I'll have to go double check. But if your class is a thief, or it takes 1250 and the other class takes 2500, one of them's still going to be third and the other one's going to be second. Like if you get a magic user versus a thief, then you'll be a 2 and 3. So which actually sadly sounds like it's a lot better for characters if you're going to do that, initially at least. And then of course you have your background characters for the character tree, because they did say it was pretty dangerous. I think really it becomes so dangerous because now players have to understand, hold on, I can't just rush out there. I can't go in that fight. And it's that old, I could call it the OSR mentality of, maybe I'll talk first. Maybe I'll look through this. Now, of course, there are monsters that do it. So I think there's that aspect. I think what a lot of people, I know we haven't really hit this, I think what happens to a lot of people when they talk about how dangerous it is they look over at how much slavery there is. It's like, it's really depressing. But I've been reading some of the other stuff.
The slavery thing doesn't bother me, because realistically, almost every game on the market, except stuff by Wizards of the Coast and a few other companies that really, virtue signal till they're blue in the face, every game I've ever experienced probably had it somewhere. It's always a choice, and it's always up to the GM and the players for to a lesser extent whether or not they want to participate or even allow it. Obviously Darksun, with I think the box that I have here, freedom is all about sort of doing a civil war like reversal of those slavery laws, removing them or freeing large amounts of slaves, something like that. That sounds like a fantastic cause to be embroiled in as a player character or as a GM, to bring about that and kind of be able to relive the whole or virtue signal if you like to be the big damn heroes and be responsible for the freedom of thousands if not tens of thousands of people. And unfortunately then the repercussions of that would be horrific, because now suddenly you have everybody there competing for things when normally they'd be living on a subsistence level diet. Now they think hey, I deserve everything the same as everybody else, and that would cause a lot of problems.
Well, I mean, part of what I look at is, and this is why I always get mad, is like, we take your slavery out. No, the assumption is that your characters were former slaves. Now you can play as if they're actual slaves now, but I think the problem is that
if you're running an evil party and there's a defiler and a couple other kinds of characters, maybe they want to and a Templar, maybe they want to go hunt slaves down and bring them back to their own. I mean, you can do that evil shit if you want, and it's no different than a million other games I can think of where people were the bad guys, and that's what they did. I mean, if you want to tell me you've never been in a game where someone wanted to start taking slaves or selling them or things like that, good on you. But I've seen it hundreds of times in my gaming, experience, and that doesn't mean you're going to go off to Libya with your life savings and buy 100 people and do horrible things to them. You could, and no one's stopping you. That's the scary part because it's happening in the real world right now. And it's not just Libya. We always use Libya because that you can literally go, I think, on Facebook and start buying people if you want, which is horrific. If you want to, virtue signal, go out and spend your hard-earned money and free those folk.
Well, my whole point on this is whenever I hear the bleakness of it, I think that they're looking at, I'm going to start off and there's a lot of slave. Yeah, but you can start from one of the slave tribes outside of the city. And then I know we've talked about this.
For me, the bleakness is the desert and temperature environments that are going to make it, because I like to, immerse myself and feel the environment and try to imagine the smells and the sights and imagining the oppressive heat 24/7 and knowing what we know. Obviously, they wouldn't care so much about not being able to bathe every day, but I can, I can imagine what that must be like, and it sounds gross. Okay.
Well, I'm gonna bring this up. You have to admit this. There's a big difference between being in the desert and being out in some place like the swamp for the sweating and everything else and what's going on. So there's that. The other thing is, it is dirty and it is supposed, but to me, I'm okay with that. To me, it's no different than whenever you read the book Dune. And that's what I really think of this. This is a Dune environment. It's very similar when I was in Afghanistan.
I actually think of it more like Barsoom because of the primitive nature of the technology. Dune's got high tech shit. Dune doesn't. Darksun doesn't have electricity, running water everywhere, things like that.
Right. Well, what I mean by Dune is the desert environment of Dune is that way. Barsoom is probably more like the flora and fauna, but I think it says it gets up to 150 degrees out here. So to me, both of them you should be picking up. But let's be honest, most of us if you look at the desert environment, and I know you live out there, but I've lived out in the desert in Afghanistan, which I'm just not a desert person, to be fair. I'd much rather be in a swamp, but that's me. And I know other people like, oh my God, I can't survive. It's too anyway. But I've dealt with those people too when I was in Orlando.
Both environments are a killer. Like with the game I'm planning on running, it's a water environment, and do you want to die from thirst or drowning? Is basically how I'm looking at it, and I'm picking up a lot from Darksun because there are some things about it I like. One of the things is you have to think before you do stuff.
And I think
people don't. Mind you, that could have been a thing from our age and our growing up, and we learned the hard way. But I'm going to be playing with professional dungeon masters. Each and every single player is going to be a former dungeon master who's like, probably going to rules lawyer the shit out of my game. But I'm ready.
Good dungeon masters don't do that. Let's be honest. It's good dungeon masters. Otherwise, guess what happens?
But you know what, though? You know why they do it? Because they're invested. Or they want to win, which can't be done. If they're invested to the point where they're really, really trying to look for that rule, then I'm kind of, I may be on the outside but on the inside, I'm like.
Well, we'll see. Okay. Well, and I know I don't want to get too far off. But here's what I've generally found is, if I'm, it's the cow patty one that you've ever, the moose turd pie.
Oh yeah. By was it Barnes? No, not Barnes and Barnes. They did fish heads, but yeah, I totally.
Well, but it was the it's like, well, the person who bitches the most becomes the DM. It's like, so you're just like, because to be fair, it's someone else's game. Now that said, it's very different when they come over and behind you said like, hey, you got this rule wrong. Or what I thought was funny is in certain cases is they'll actually, this is what I've done. No, that's not how this rule works. And it works against the player's favor. It's whatever they're trying to do to rules lawyer versus just like, hey, just be aware of this. We'll go forward, but just next time, just remember this. But I agree with you is, that's what comes in there. And some people are like, I don't want any books on the table. That's a play style. But okay, so so that was the basic character creation. Your character is not as fragile as they make it out to be.
It's not that. It's that the the combat is going to be vastly different.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also a big fan of metal. In all the things that you can do with metal compared to bone, because you mind you, there's not a lot of wood. Okay, there's some,
Right. Yeah, there's some in
but
here.
trying to make make the things that we traditionally made out of metal, trying to make them out of wood, to me says that everything's going to break. It's just a matter of when. When you're
Well,
playing like a Western game and you've got a cart that's got metal in its wheels, those wheels are they're still going to break.
sure. So this is what it says. Just because they have a specific rule for this, and it talks about the damage and hit probability go down whether you're using bone, stone, obsidian, or wood, and then they talk about cost. So the cost gets decreased depending on what's there. But breaking weapons, whenever a successful attack inflicts maximum damage, there's a 1 in 20 chance that the weapon will break. So okay, it's not just automatically. So players are going to have a couple of weapons just in case, and I like the fact that it can break. It's like, I'll think twice. But to be fair, and again, I like the Neolithic aspect to it, which is that's what our ancestors did. Guess what they did? They brought out their flint napping and went, and within half an hour, but they would flint nap, and that's what they would go through. Your son just gets more and more goth every day.
How? Oh, it's that. I'm gonna have that cutscene anyways.
You got that. You got the cross right there. I mean, come on. You just scream like 1990s. Which, to be fair, that's what we're talking about. 1990s. It just needs to be more black, like your father, and then you're 100% emo.
Yeah, this is white. It doesn't look. I mean, it has some black spots on. I just don't own a pure white shirt.
I know.
Which I need to get one.
You just need some color on you. Otherwise, you're just you're just half emo. That's not.
It looks weird on the camera because it's like black.
I know. I'm just teasing you, Jack. You have better style than I do, so I can't complain.
It does.
But so there was that. That's part of the reason I do enjoy that is you get those things. You get some alternate materials. But I think that in modern eras we discount too many things like that. But that also means that when you find a cache of metal, that's important. It's go ahead, Shadow.
Sorry about that. He actually came up here with a purpose.
That's good.
So a 1 in 20 is not too bad, but it's not even so much that it's just a lot of for me a lot of it is purely aesthetic.
Okay, and I agree. If it's not your aesthetic, but here's the other part I look at is, and I don't know, how far did you get through Dragon Kings, or have you got to that one yet?
I've read it once before, but right now I'm about halfway through the Wanderer's Journal, which is just flavor text and details, no actual mechanics. And I'll be if I'm lucky, I'll finish this tonight, and then tomorrow I'll go into Dragon Kings, and after that I'm going to look at either the Ivory Triangle or Freedom to get those knocked out. And it turns out what I have in the Iron Triangle box that I showed you, that's actually what's supposed to be there. I was just seeing those books sold separately all over the place and thought they were like adventure modules. And I'm like, oh no, this is just what's supposed to be here. And I might not even read the Ivory Triangle because it's mostly just more world box setting stuff. It's a different part of the planet. If it's not like actual adventure stuff, I'm not going to get much out of it other than yet another way to organize a desert society. And I realized Athos, the world of Darksun, isn't just pure desert everywhere, but I find it kind of really stretching credibility without at least one ocean.
No. I'm okay.
Unless the planet is much smaller than Earth.
Well, there is an ocean way off the corner, but I understand what it is. It's not that it does. If you actually read it, they do get rain rarely. They do. You know, to me, it's more. I want to put it's more like when I was in Afghanistan or something. They probably get 5 to 7 inches of rain a year, which can support.
No, we don't get that much here.
Okay.
Well, other than Hillary coming through last month, I think it was, we don't get that much rain here.
So you get some of that, and then of course that's why you want to. That's why I mentioned very similar to Dune or Mad Max. Mad Max is a good one if you watch Fury Road, of what it is like there. Well, that Mad Max to me it would be very similar to if you want to go inland Australia. That's how I look at a lot of it. And it's not that you can't, but guess what now happens? People start living in like huge adobe houses. They start doing certain things, and they have to tend everything. And like you said, Barsoom has something very similar. The problem is that we're already in a fantasy world. We just have to let go of some things. I understand what you're talking about. Well, that's not realistic. Yeah, I know, but neither is Greyhawk or the others we deal with. But part of it is you're not going to find a lot of pools of water, and when you do, that's someone that's very wealthy. And that's why I think of very similar to Dune or these other things like when you find those areas of water, that's important, and they're probably pulling a lot of the water from wells in most cases. Hey, it goes in there and it would evaporate, but a lot of it soaks right into the ground, and that's where they have to get in there. And now, so yeah, if it's not your aesthetic, yeah, Darksun's not going to work for you. It's just like Ravenloft. Well, I want to play a happy campaign. Yeah, Ravenloft isn't going to make it. I mean,
well, that was one of the things I was actually specifically looking for, because I had read through a different game where it's so bleak and dark that they literally say in the book there is no more art.
Oh no, this one's exactly that. If you actually look at it,
I was very pleased to read that, because to say there is no art is literally the stupidest thing I've ever read in a role-playing game. The society and the universe, and mind you, it's a space game. I think it's Death in Space. The entire universe is literally stopped doing art. Are you freaking insane? You're going to have children, scratching on the walls of the starship, or using crayons or boogers or whatever. There's always going to be art unless you have literally, gone into the depths of despair, the likes of which would literally crush a society to dust overnight. It was just the dumbest thing I ever read. And I was trying to look while I'm reading through the Wanderer's Journal, what makes life enjoyable on this planet. How, when your characters are done doing their adventuring and they're not actually, getting drunk in the local tavern, which, might not actually be fun for some folks. I've done it. Probably do it again someday, but not in any near future situation. What are the other things, besides the gladiator? What other kind of enjoyable activities would there be? Well, art's great for a whole lot of people.
Music's a big one in here. I mean, they have bards that are specifically in here. The other part,
right. So that was nice to try to picture, some of those kinds of activities, and even in, ancient times there were things like board games and dice games and things like that. There's obviously no television or radio or things like that. I did find it, kind of bleak that there is no history or that nobody cares. Life is too hard for people to worry about history, beyond, the last month or so.
I'm gonna bring up another point here. So you have to read in here, which is note that there is history, there is reading and writing, but look at who's allowed to do it. Only nobles.
That's another thing I hated.
Well, but
the not being able to read or write unless you were of a certain class. However, I get why people would do it.
Well, but that's the intention. Is just like look at nowadays we're trying to erase all the history. Well, if we erase it, then we can rewrite whatever's there. So also the Dragon King's been there forever. But if you actually read a little bit, it starts saying, "Oh yeah, the traders know how to read and write. They mask it as one thing, and I think that's part of what comes into it. That's part of the why I kind of like it is you kind of get this resistance movement. I know how to read. I just pretend I don't know how to read. And you start going through and then you start passing secret messages, y'all put a scratch over here.
Yep.
And, it's great. I think that
Or
that's,
even like, hobo signs and things like that. Sure.
Exactly.
But for me, that takes away one of the great leisure activities, which is reading for pleasure. But clearly there aren't a lot of people writing for pleasure. I suppose you don't have any of the artisan class allowed to read. So who's writing the books, if anybody?
Well,
probably not that many. You'd probably on the whole planet maybe get 5 new books written a year, and most of those aren't literature. They're factual.
Well. Here's the other part that I think that comes to is the nobles are going to do it. I mean, if you may want to actually look at. Do you have the slave book, the DSS1 slave book? Because I'll find it here in a second. Well, just my luck, I closed it down. It's the DSR1 slave. It's the slave tribes.
No, I don't have that one.
So it describes what the slaves do. And then they say that a lot of the slaves can read without actually knowing that they can read. But then the other part is we talk about things, but most Neolithic cultures did oral history. So they would sit down and then they would talk, and then you'd memorize stuff. And that's one of the things I think sometimes in the modern era we forget about. They're like, oh, it's a game of telephone. That's not the way it works. Like my son, as I have him learning poetry right now. No, if you wanted to be a storyteller, you had to memorize verbatim everything. And most of it was, okay, now you're doing singing and songs, and you have to get all the words correct. You want to bug people who love certain songs, just start changing them while you're singing. Like, that's not what it said. But
right,
that's your storyteller. So I think that sometimes we look at it. This is why I said I like the Neolithic aspect. Yes, there are people that can read. Yes, there are people. A lot more can read than are supposed to. And that's what the Templars get mad about because they want to control on who can do that. Now, what are your players going to start off as? Are you going to start off as a noble?
What a bunch of rat bastards those guys are.
Yeah, well, nobles or and that's why I said I was reading the slave one earlier today. So we were going to have this discussion. So DSR1, and they talk about a lot of the slaves. They said the slaves that like freemen might have 2 or 3 slaves. They said they're going to treat them pretty much equal, which was fairly, if you have a small number of slaves, you treat them as human beings because you know them as human beings. Very similar to what we saw with Ben-Hur. Remember that? Where his slave was taking care of a lot of the stuff that was doing there. But then you get the nobles, which might have hundreds of slaves, and they look at them no more than cattle. It's like, hey, you know what? You did this, I cut off your hand, I do that. And so, there's a lot of different aspects. Some of the slaves are owned by the city. Of course, like all slaves in government, they don't care about you anyway. So you're just a cog number. And I think that sometimes, when we're talking about these games, what are the players going to find interesting? To me, I would go over and I'd have to go look at how many moons are there? What are we going to see? When's the sunset? As much as you still want people to do slavery, you don't want to work them to death because that just means you have to find more slaves, which is hard enough. And it's kind of hard when people have babies to raise them up if they're not being productive because, let's be honest, small children are not that productive for the first 5 to 7 years. So, Well,
unless you live in the Ukraine.
Well, let's not go there.
Sorry,
but that's what dark. In like all games, it just depends on how dark do you want.
Yeah, it was really evident that this game is literally on hard mode. Okay,
yes.
even things like I was talking with George from Emperor's Choice today, and we were talking about immortals, elves and things like that, as well as the other long and lived races. Now, I get that life expectancy would be diminished greatly, but they literally chopped off 99% of the elves' lifespan in Darksun, including the factor of the difference between AD&D and second edition lifespans, which now a lot of people are like, well, you're never going to play that long, so why worry about it? That's not the point. Knowing that you're going to live 3,000 to 10,000 years, if nothing bad happens to you, makes you play a certain way. But if you tell me I'm running an elf, but I'm only going to live maybe 200 years if I'm lucky, because of that's when I'll be old and decrepit. That's not really an elf anymore. That's a mutated, because something happened to the world that was of Darksun, and to me, that's what I'm more or mostly intrigued about. This, to me, it seems like there would be all kinds of supplements or mention of all of the places that are under the sand.
There are mentions of several of them, actually, and I know that you haven't quite looked at, but I think part of it also was the idea was it's kind of
Wouldn't you think that the entire society would, in a life-saving attempt, try to dig underground to make their cities as much underground as possible? Obviously, sandstorms are going to make that a little difficult, but if you get to a certain point, there would be a society somewhere on Athos that saw it coming and found a way to use, daylight spells to make real sunlight under the ground so they could grow real crops and literally shut themselves off from the world.
When reading it, I always got the feeling that there was a lot underground. Most people are doing work during the day where they have to toil anyway. I'm not saying that you can't do light spells, but I'd say, hey, look, light spells are fine, but they don't create natural light.
No, that's why I said daylight. There is a spell that actually does make actual sunlight, because it hurts vampires. It would probably make vampires grow.
This is where you get your clerics and your druids that do some of these things. The other part that when you start looking at it is, and I always got this feeling, was that it reminds me of very similar to Adobe buildings and, buildings and cliffs where you're looking at things that are very thick. So it will be dark inside a lot of times. They may not grow everything inside, but you get a lot of that aspect. But you're right.
It seemed to me that in the first book, there was very, very little mention of underground things, even to the point where most of the dwarves actually live above the surface. It's literally not just hard mode, but let's turn all the tropes, or destroy all the old tropes and try to make some new ones with just the bare remnants of the old concept of Dungeons and Dragons. And there's nothing wrong with that for a complete change, but there's some things that I wouldn't have let go so easily.
Well, and I think that's part of what I like about it is just send it off, entirely for that. But to me, I always get the feeling that there is stuff underground. Not all the time, but a lot of times it is, hey, we're going to do this. What it reminds me of is a lot of Bedouins and how certain people live in.
But that's my point. With your belief that it's very reminiscent of Dune, then there would be the Fremen. That would be a big thing that the bad guys don't know about, and that you'd want to have this whole network underground where that's where the real water is, and the suckers upstairs don't know about it, and we're doing what we can to bring Arrakis back to its former glory, or terraform it or something like that, despite the Dragon King's influence and desires.
So that's where your druids and your clerics get into there. And I know you're not far enough into the Dragon Kings. You start looking at some of the spells, and they have create vegetation for 25 miles. There's one of them you can create spell. To be fair, a lot of them are 10th level. So when you get past that 20th level, which reminds me, once you get up to a 20th level, we're not saying that you don't have enough. It's just not going to be, what we call, this isn't Earthdawn, where everyone was hidden underneath.
That's another funny thing you keep mentioning. In AD&D, I only had one party ever get even close to, let's say, 15th level, let alone 20th level. And I, even before second edition, I used a lot of the rules for XP as regular formulaic. This is what you get for doing this kinds of things. And getting to 20th level in Darksun just seems like that would be even harder to do.
And it should be. I guess part of what I was looking at is, what I'm saying is that when you look at when those characters get, again, when you're doing 20th level, it's you're probably playing the equivalent of multi-generational. They're doing anti-aging spells. They found stuff. Some of what we're looking at, like you said, is there's a lot of shifting sand and things. But whenever I look at the cities themselves, looking at them, I look at them as giant adobe brick buildings, but I also think they have undergrounds and stuff like that. There's a lot of tunneling that goes on below as well, just to get out of the heat. What is it? Isn't there a place in California where that guy made? He dug underground and then he put an orange orchard for some of that.
I'm not familiar with that story.
No, there's a guy that actually did it. I saw it online and I was watching the video. And what he did is he just created holes on the top, and he actually built everything underground so he doesn't get that 120-degree temperature up there. And he was able to actually.
Are you talking like the Earth ships?
No, this is a guy in the 1920s who spent like 30 years digging underground. You can go visit it. I just don't know what it was called.
It sounds kind of like the Earth ships, which are homes out in the middle of nowhere that are totally self-sufficient with their own running water and farms and things like that. But for the most part, all underground and using all kinds of garbagey materials, but yet still creating these magnificent underground living places.
So it's called, now I don't know how far you are away. It's in Fresno, California, the Forestier Underground Gardens in Fresno, California.
L says nuclear bunker. It had one orange tree underground. I'm not sure.
No. I'm talking about this guy actually. I saw it. You can go look it on YouTube. It's the Forestier Underground Gardens, and it's in Fresno. I don't know how far Fresno is from you.
It's not far.
So you might want to go visit that with your son at some point, just to see what's there. But it's like 20 acres. I think it used to be a little bit more, but they sold off over time. But it was as one guy. One guy basically built all these underground chambers, and then he would put holes and everything else. I recommend, and there's stuff on YouTube. It's actually pretty close. But that's not. So to me, there's always a combination of things. It's not just that. Oh, it's going to be this. You're going to be out in the hot desert. You're going to be out there. This is almost all the city states are somewhere where they have some kind of water. The question is it brackish or not? So then and then they have the slaves that work out in the fields. And so you have to have some irrigation for that. So it's one of these things that it doesn't bother me. Now, when you start reading the book, they are supposed to have cities that are buried underground. They just don't specify them to you. That's for you as the DM to let the players go there. And I'm okay.
I just think it was a wasted opportunity, or maybe it's in another book that neither of us have read. But I would have started from that. You know what I mean? From that concept of, the game's Dungeons and Dragons, for Christ's sake. What better way to have even more dungeons? Know what I mean? Because the entire planet has almost become a dungeon, so to speak, underground with all kinds of, places to explore and what have you, and more reason to use the graph paper and your Sharpie.
Well, to me, that's one of those things. You go out there, and they're supposed to be out. There are supposed to be ancient cities that are underground or buried beneath. You're supposed to explore those, and the reason is, why aren't they marked on the map? Well, those have already been looted. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to follow the new stuff, and that's where you find your magic items. And then, of course, as you get more and more, once you get up to a certain level, you're supposed to get stands, which is very different than how, of course, they were trying to integrate this with the battle system. I
kind of noticed that without knowing it. I'm just like, man, this seems like it's just right for battle systems, which I wish I never would have gotten rid of, because I did actually play quite a bit of that, and it really wasn't that difficult for my players to get into it. These days, nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to get involved in actual military campaigns. They may say they do as a DM or player, but they don't do it. Everything is hand waved away. It's all on the periphery. You guys are, you're in the war, but you're not really in the war. when someone tells me, I literally want to know what it feels like to be in the trenches or on the front line, and like that scene from Glory, the end, where the captain, charges forward, he dies, but I want to roll the dice and see how many of those suckers I can take out. Not just the DM rolls a die and goes, oh, you killed 15. No, 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 no. I want to roll that. I want to feel it.
So Justin just looked at the Underground Orchard I was looking at, and yeah, that's what I see with Darksun in many cases. And Freeman don't have those.
I would like to agree, but I don't see it that way. I see it more like ancient era, Egypt and things like that, where it's a lot less pleasant and a lot less where you actually have any control. That looks like the average person could do that and have that, whereas in Darksun, the average person was a slave.
Well, no. Well, I'm not saying that you don't have a lot of people. Yeah, but you have a lot of slaves. But then the other part is you have freemen that owns the slaves. You have the city that owns slaves. And it just depends on how you want to, a freeman, what was the average house size in the United States? Average house size in the United States in 1950 was 950 square feet, which is what a lot of, now we assume, it's going to be 1,500 to 1,800. But, but then the other part is we're also forgetting that in most houses is, look, if you're going to be with a free man, he's going to have houses. And then that's why I actually liked reading the DSR one. They were explaining that, the nobles think, oh my God, I don't want to have children that work for me cleaning dishes and stuff. Whereas the freemen would have those, but then they would have a couple of slaves with them as well who would do it. It's the problem I have with any kind of slavery is people forget that it runs the whole gambit between, everyone's being whipped, which is what Darksun has if you're an agricultural laborer, to artisans where it's just like in the United States for a while, depending on where you were. But if you were in the house and sometimes they would let, you work. Why did they make it so it was illegal to teach slaves to read and write? That's to make them dependent on everyone so they can't go out.
And they can't organize and revolt and uprise and all that stuff. Absolutely.
But Frederick Douglass learned how to read and write despite that. I think he was a former slave. Anyway, they learned how to read and write by looking over the corners of stuff. And so you have your artisans, you have the people that do the ceramics and everything else. And so for the freeman, your family, even though I own you, you're still family because you're helping me get more wealth and things like that. And I think that sometimes,
because maybe you literally did the thing that makes families, which I know they're going to gloss over those facts, but that's literally what you would eventually have. After a certain period of time, there would be these huge extended families that would eventually rival the nobility to a huge extent at some point. But they try to like D&D keep the world has these built-in boundaries that keep it in that era. Otherwise, technological advances are going to happen.
So what I mean, let's say for Darksun, for the most case, when you look at it, is okay, but how long did the Neolithic era last? 7,000 to 8,000 years at least. So even if you're advancing, you're not advancing fast enough. And the other part is you have these Dragon Kings, which are keeping down, which comes down to the next part of when you start getting preservers. You know what, Iron Man, that's the way I like doing it. But the problem that I have with most of them is it's just Darksun, I think, is one of those that you have to really start keeping track of things that most players don't keep track of. How much water do you have in your cistern? How much, metal? What is going out here? And, when you start getting, like you said, when you start getting up those higher levels, to be fair, then I want to go ride out on my giant chariot and my full plate armor with my magic sword and shield, and they'll be like, it's like a vision of a whole god as you go out there with your army behind you, and your sword might be a +2 or +3. Now, and that's what I was saying, once you hit the 20th level, if you are a cleric, if you're a magic user, basically psionicist, which is only humans at that point. Only humans can do that. If you can
Wait,
do that,
only humans can do what?
they can evolve into another creature.
Okay.
So your spoiler for anyone else to play, if you're gonna run this, that's fine. But the Dragon Kings are basically ones are 20th level magic user. Well, they're defilers. They're 20th level defiler and 20th level psionicist. And then they get to go over, then you get to choose if you want to become a Dragon King. If you choose to become a Dragon King, so the Dragon Kings you start changing over time. You have the equivalent with the Preserver, but there are no Preservers that have ever reached that because the Dragon Kings tried taking out the Preservers. But the Preservers have their own, while Defilers don't have their own organization for the most part, Defilers don't have their own organization. The Preservers do, which is your kind of your secret society. Oh yeah, you're a Preserver here. We're going to protect you over here. We're going to do this. And so that's why I get the resistance thing. Is if you're going to play in the city, you get that. If you're going to play out in the wilderness, then we're going to go through it else. There's a lot of different things. D&D to me, I wish they had done. Someone else had done a really good war game for that. Something, and I don't mean Warhammer Fantasy, and it's gotten further and further away from its original stuff.
Have you ever read Swords and Spells?
I haven't tried Swords and Spells. I'll be honest with you. If I was going to run stuff, I would do it very similar to how they did in Star Frontiers with the one against against the Sathar with the Battle of Volturnus. It's like, hey guys, we have certain battles that are certain fights during the battle that are absolutely critical, and if you win that battle, you have a greater chance of success. And if you lose that battle, and so it keeps on having this balance back and forth, and I like that myself. Well, you say larger than 50 men, they get out into the thousands, Justin. When you're high enough level as a cleric, you can make enough water to support large numbers of people.
That's another thing I wanted to talk about. I really I don't like the encapsulating Darksun in a pocket away from everything else to also include the gods. I think that you're missing out on a lot of lore and a lot of interesting storytelling without having, you don't have to have a whole freaking, gigantic pantheon of every race, elves, dwarves, etc. I thought it would have been more interesting to have a good and evil pantheon, maybe even a divine force in the middle, but yet this is like this particular world's last battle between good and evil, and so far it looks like evil's winning, but you still have the gods. You would still have having paladins that can't wear armor because it's too freaking hot type of thing. I think would be kind of interesting, because then you'd have these characters that you wouldn't see the paladin come riding up in his silver plate mail, off, a mile away. You would never know until you got close, or you could detect evil or good.
I mean, just our talking to me. That's why what you're talking about to me is, well, then you play Al Qadim.
Yeah, I have it. I did. I have like a lot of it, and I enjoyed a lot of it. But I really couldn't get players to want to play the character classes. So I would have them travel to those places. In this one campaign I ran, I literally had the equivalent of character, Al Qadim and something else. But I had different countries that were, my excuse to, if they ever go here, I'm going to break out the Oriental Adventures book. If they ever go here, I got these books, and it was a lot of fun to run that campaign, and get them to come into these places so that it would be totally different, and the culture shock and the oohs and ahs of seeing all the different sites is something that personally I like to bring into a game. I know a lot of players just don't care anymore. They don't take notes. They don't remember what town was the last town they were in as in its name, and sometimes I'm guilty of that sort of thing too. if everything is so samey without a lot of description, or all the descriptions it make my mind's eye see like the same freaking thing as the last town, as the last town, as the last town. I want to really see, different locations and to be able to tell that you're in a different country, not just because the GM told you so.
So I think that's where actually Darksun does a fairly good job. Is they have these discussions with how each city is different, how it's different where you work. It's that kind of things that are part of it. Is you get the whole aspect. Is each city state feels different. And yes, there is an ocean that's drying up over time, but it's over there. And like you said, it feels very similar to Barsoom, but you don't play Darksun because you want to play the regular D&D game. I don't play Ravenloft when I want to. That's why Absolutely. I like it, because I want a Neolithic feel. And
part of my point was see, what the players want and what the players get are a lot of times two different things.
Sure.
And if I want them to play Darksun, they're either playing Darksun or they're going to skip a couple of nights. Now, if they get there and they hate it, well, I want to at least be fair enough to leave them a door out.
Well, what my view on this is,
which was kind of like it made no sense to me why they would just go Darksun's over here and you can't get in, you can't get out.
We don't. Do you know why they did it? And I understand why they did it from it, because they know players coming in with their tons of metal, and they're like, "Oh, I'm just going to open up a gate and bring stuff back and forth, and I'm going to bring my spell."
Well, that's why you don't let them.
Well, that's what Darksun does. Darksun does that by saying it's encapsulated, and you can't.
But it also doesn't let anybody come in.
Well, there are ways
if they can't. I mean, what a great lesson to be able to teach your players. Oh, you've arrived. You go through a portal. You're in Darksun. It's hotter than crap, and you're stripping down your armor, throwing it in your bag, and you're basically dragging it behind you in the sand, hoping the bag don't rip open until you find some place where you can get water, and then you find out that suit of armor is worth way more here than it was there, and maybe to get the spell components to get back home, you're going to have to sell that fancy +2 plate. What you might get in return could be,
Well, my view on that is that you just transport them to some place like Australia, in the center of the continent, and then they can get a taste of it, but they're not stuck there. And then the players can go, okay, I like this, but this is what part of the reason I sometimes get frustrated with D&D is they just act like, oh, you can just go over here. Oh, you can go over here. Oh, it's just so easy. And I went, no, it's.
Oh no, I've never. Other than the one item that I do occasionally give out where that makes it a possibility is the Amulet of the Plains, because that's all it does. But like I have, what is it called? Planescape. Oh, I if it wasn't as worth as much money as it is, I would just toss it.
Manual of the Plains to me was far superior when you look at it. Manual of the Plains, the first edition, was far superior as a book.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it gave you plenty of description to still make it your own and do stuff. Personally, I actually like the way Arduin did a lot of the alternate dimensions of like the elemental planes and the hells. You go, you die. So as soon as you try to take a breath, you're dead. The elemental plane of earth and fire would not even have air as we know it, so to speak. It would be so toxic, or blistering hot that you would need more than just your paltry amount of normal plane traveling gear like the amulet or the necklace of adaptation, a ring of fire resistance. That's not going to cut.
Well,
and you're going to need a lot more.
Well, and then the other part is that when you talk about Darksun being prevent. Well, don't I kind of like stop mixing your jelly with my beef jerky kind of thing. It's because
depending on the jelly, that might actually be pretty tasty.
Yeah, well, there's times you want that, but I think that there's enough in the regular world to do that. But part of the Darksun is that Neolithic aspect. And then I know we were talking that one night is, hey, there was a civilization 9,000 years ago
Mhm.
that had metal. And guess what? 9,000 years means it's underground, which means you have to go look for that. And as I was, as we were discussing this, as you begin to read more and more books, you begin to get the feeling that there are these places underground and things like that that the players have to go search for, that are protected by ancient undead that in some cases remember when the world was green. And sometimes you can talk to them, sometimes you can't. That's where you would find some of the books. But that's when you comprehend languages really matters. I'm going to do this where they have the frescoes, and you start finding out. I was reading which was kind of weird. The one area where they were having the mine lords, they were like 9,000 years old. If you can talk to some of these people and find these things out, you can say, "Oh, that's where I'm going."
Mhm.
So I think that it's what do you want from it? But the real point is the average person doesn't. Hell, how much does the average person know what the have read the Federalist Papers here in the United States, even though they're free? You can find them online.
I've got 3 books with them in them. Oh no, 2.
I find them online, and I have to get people like, well, that is what the founding fathers intended. Really? Why don't you go read the founding fathers' actual written notes? I didn't know. Don't spout off being ignorant, okay? Stop spouting off what politicians tell you, and actually go research it. But that's also why the Dragon Kings don't want you to be able to read. That's the part of it. But yeah, well, and I have no problems with anti-federalists, but we have the papers for the Federalist Papers and the Anti-Federalist Papers to argue of what the original founding fathers thought, and I think that's important from our aspect. But in Darksun, you can do that. You can find, and that's part of, I think, the fun of being a player is you start pulling the threads and you start finding out what happened. And then they do actually, if you start reading all of it, they do unravel a lot of that. I won't call it the meta plot, but it was the ancient history of Darksun.
Yeah, that kind of pisses me off, man. That
What?
stuff should be in. It should be in a very specific book. Obviously, maybe not in the Darksun box set, but it should be in one of the one of the maybe even a Dungeon Master's Guide to the World of Athos or something like that, to where you can pick it up and go, oh, this is what's really going on, as opposed to following the breadcrumbs, so to speak.
Yeah, but I'm going to be honest about this because
I know that's all sales, but yeah.
Yeah, from a sales standpoint, I don't disagree, but now we have everything out there. However, as a player, I kind of like the breadcrumbs that are slowly filtered out. And, what happened in there. And this is something that, if you want me to give you some more spoilers, basically almost all the races except the Thrive Queen are evolved from halflings.
I can imagine why that would be the case.
So the halflings kind of did the halflings did all their magic and stuff like that, and they screwed up with the magic. They cast certain spells, and that's part of the reason that the world is dying in that aspect. But you find out, like, oh, okay, like when we say Dragon Kings, the players aren't supposed to really know that once you hit 20th level, you start becoming a Dragon King. They aren't supposed to know that you become an elemental when you hit 20th level cleric. Sorry, spoilers for everybody. Tough. You aren't supposed to know that you became an Avignon or whatever it is, which basically looks like a Vorlon. You remember when the Vorlon removed everything? Mm-hmm. They kind of look like the Vorlon, which I'm beginning to wonder if Michael Straczynski literally read Darksun and said, yeah, that's cool. That's what I'm going to use. They start getting wings. At one point, they actually get like a -6 armor class that can only be hit by a +5 weapon. And you're like, well, other than Dragon Kings and certain things that have really high hit dice, players now have to afford it. And it's not that they won't find it, but you're just supposed, like your first 3 levels, your character, say first 3 levels, but your characters might find a couple of swords. Then when they hit like 6th level, hey, I'll give you a +1. And then when you hit like 9th level, here's a +2. It's just supposed to be longer for that aspect. But like we were talking about the battle system, boy, when you start looking at what happens with fighters and rogues and when they get in there, they're supposed to start suddenly raising like armies of thousands. So that's what.
Which is, I have no problems with that. I have run campaigns where the players were literally, generals and admirals and things like that that did work their way up to that position. It's just that nobody wants to do that, or most folks don't want to do that in a role playing game. And then, mind you, these same players were playing things like Battle Cry and Axis and Allies, and I'm like, but you don't want to do that here. Nope.
Well, see, we know, and that's just depends on players. But if you,
I kind of get it. They want the more personal kind of glory as opposed to commanding the troops and stuff. But at the same time, it's like, let's see how good you are, bud.
Well, see, in Darksun, it actually says as you begin getting levels, there's the expectation that at 10th level characters start becoming famous. He said you just don't hide away from that. Your stories start floating around where you are, and then once you hit 20th level, and then they talk about, oh, these are just the followers you get automatically. This ignores all the followers that you've picked up along the way during your adventure.
Right.
And that's part of it. And you go, oh, okay, it's
unless you're a rogue, in which case you could do so. But I mean, to be honest, if the players wanted to hide, that's you could do that. I mean, how hard is it to change your appearance and lie about your name and move to a new town? Boom, problem solved.
The problem that you have with this is people start knowing. Well, the other part is when we talk about power, and I really haven't looked at it, is when you start looking at every character gets psionic powers.
Mm-hmm.
So at a certain point, it's not that you can't hide all the time. That's what preservers are trying to do. It's just, let's be fair. By the time you start getting 10th level, people start knowing who you are. You're even if they don't know you by face, your name starts getting out there. Mm-hmm. And that's part of what's supposed to happen. And then all of a sudden you start showing up in the Dragon King's radar. It's like, okay, what am I going to do? And that's when you start going out there. And that's some of the things that I like about Darksun, is that it encouraged you to raise those armies to, very similar to John Carter. Oh, look, you've got the tribes of the Thri Kreen, which are not really, they're green Martians, except they're insects is the only difference when you start looking at the Thri Kreen.
They're Franks. Get it right.
They're what? Oh, the
Franks from Arduin.
Oh, okay. And then you start looking at arms. Oh, okay. But then you start looking at the your halflings, and we always joke about cannibal halflings. And oh, look, the elves may join you. Then you start getting the it just starts getting more and more in there. And you said, okay, now I've got this guy, and the clerics start helping you out because, well, they want to see the world come back too. And the Dragon Kings are literally living in they're living in forest, which is something that you have to, when you start reading through some of the books, they have all these trees surrounding them, the preserver trees. And then I believe that Justin mentioned this last time with, when you start getting I guess in his comments, you get the fruits. How cool is it that you can actually plant a fruit and it can bring a potion back? And then the next part you can do is if you cast a permanency spell, is it lasts 99 years and keeps producing magical fruits.
Okay, here's the problem.
Sure.
With the setting of the game being the way it is, and by setting I actually mean like the dial from deadly to 11 where this game is at. I wouldn't even bother as a player just knowing that the GM's just going to fuck with it every step of the way and be like, nope, I'm eating it. Sorry, not doing it. Because you're just going to use that as an opportunity to screw with the party, forcing them to find a location to do it and waste all their time and resources becoming freaking potion farmers as opposed to what they really want to do, which is find some freaking dungeons, go in and, kill some monsters and get in some other kinds of adventures and what have you. I get it. It's tactical freaking genius move on the designers and everything else. But with the way they've subtly, sort of taught the DMs of Darksun to really, kind of nickel and dime them to death.
I don't feel that I don't think they're nickeling and diming you to death.
Maybe that wasn't their intention, but I know how people are, and they're going to subtly kind of absorb this mentality of I got to make it hard. I got to make it hard. I got to make it hard.
I don't
It's
think
just going
that
to lead to that nine times out of 10.
Well, 9 times out of 10, but let's be honest. If you're not having fun with that, if you're going to be that, but for me is, look, part of it is building your, and because that's very similar to Numenera in this case. You're starting to build your civilization, and you're going to be out in the. So of course you want to say, all right, I'm going to make sure I kill off any of these things. I'm not going to be too much of that. It's very much like the Fremen versus the Harkonnens. We're going to have a few of these, but we're going to hide them. And then whenever anyone comes around, we kill them, and then we hide certain things. And as your players get more powerful, there's ways of doing that.
Real quick, I'm going to address the most recent comment by El. Then I'm going to go back.
Sure.
Nobody taught any GM to be an ass. They did that on their own. That is not true. The Dungeon Master's Guide most certainly taught the Dungeon Master to try to trick the players into drinking the poison potion in the Dungeon Master's Guide, as well as to try to put on the Ring of Contrariness, as well as other things. That right there, that's enough right there to kind of create that adversarial mentality, DM versus player. Not always, but it was there. And when I saw that, I'm like, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that at all, because that goes against the literally try to trick your players into drinking the poison potion so that they could roll a saving throw and potentially die.
So
not doing that.
Here's the way that I looked at it, and a little bit different. And this is after listening to Sean with Mage's Musings. You roll and you let the dice fall where they may, and then the players make a decision. Now, if one of them dies from the poison, that's fine. At that point, guess what they're starting to do? Identify.
Right,
Identify.
No,
And
even with you can't identify poison unless it's technically magical poison.
Well,
it's just poison.
Yes, but if it's not magical, then why are you drinking it?
Because it says potion of extra healing on the bottle. Because in my attempt to trick the players into drinking it, that's what I would do. It says extra healing on it. Do you drink it?
Well, no offense. I wouldn't trust some random. They don't have the FDA out there that says, "Hey, we're going to be doing the label."
Well, I mean, what other way?
If
you were going to take that literally, what other way would you have to trick the players into drinking it?
I don't want to trick the players into drinking it. What I want to do is,
why would you trick the players into drinking it unless you actually want to teach them to be assholes?
Well, but the way I look at it, I don't remember that being in there. Maybe it is. I don't remember it. I remember
it's in the Dungeon Master's Guide, and it sucks.
It's in
because it should be like that.
Well, I'm not saying it isn't, but it's first edition or second edition, because second edition Dungeon Master's Guide.
First.
Sometimes when I look at that stuff, I'm like, well, if it's not magical, the first thing I would do is I'd probably test it on something before I even go anywhere, because I don't try drinking weird beakers when I go into a chemistry lab, because nothing good can happen.
But think about it like this, though. Old school AD&D, you may not actually have the identify spell or want to risk reducing your strength to 6 for 24 hours to cast the spell on the one potion that you just found.
Well, yeah, you're supposed to go back to home and then do all that. And see that, I mean, the more that I've been reading about first edition and listening to Sean also talk about it, the more I realized that really what Gygax was doing was having players come in every night, and they would go play for whatever. And the expectation is you go in the dungeon just far enough and you come out before that night is over. Otherwise, we get to roll for, when you're not there, I get to roll for random monsters every 10 minutes, or whatever it is. And I was like, yeah, but they were kind of doing a wargaming thing. Even Castle Amber mentions it in somewhere that when the players aren't there, they just get encased and we just stop time. And to be fair, we didn't play with Gygax. We played at home with a small group, but I agree with you. And most of us, I don't know how your group was. We tossed out tons of stuff that he was doing without understanding the way that he was playing the game. And
now, go ahead.
I played basic D&D. That was my first introduction, and that's kind of the way I looked at how you played. And then AD&D just had more stuff to make it more realistic, kind of thing, and give you more options. Because my friend got the basic red box D&D. I was like, oh, this is so cool. And then but then I was like, but advanced is advanced. And I left in retrospect like I think basic was actually better than advanced Dungeons and Dragons because it was simpler and allowed things to move faster. I know L likes the basic, the BX stuff.
Yeah, I can't stand it. L also says here, any setting is just dirt to play on. If you want it to be, use what you want and discard the rest. That's actually why I'm reading Darksun, is to mine it and get inspired for ideas. And unfortunately, it's showing me all the things I don't want to do, which is actually the way I've always looked at my inspiration. Is I don't ever want to do this. I really despise this thing, so I'm going to go out of my way to not do this one thing or these 20 things or whatever. But at the same time, I want the game world that I'm working on to be tough, but tough in a different way. Not the environment is always trying to dehydrate you and leave you a skeleton out in the desert, but other more interesting ways to die, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, but I think part of it comes down to, we talk about these things, but that's not really that much different than players going across. That's why I mentioned Al Qadim and things like that. It also gets it so the players aren't going to say, I'm just going to travel everywhere. Like, I hate saying this, the new 5th edition stuff, distance of travel really doesn't mean too much. Whereas in Athens, it's like, look, you go across when you leave between two civilized areas, there's monsters in between. It's dangerous. You want to run. You don't want, and that creates some of that, this is why I mentioned Dune, that creates the, hey, we better make sure we have the proper stuff. We're going to go in these caravans from point A to point B. We want to do that. Just because you're a slave, when you run away, they may not know that you're a slave anymore, and they still need people out there. You're going to do caravan raids and stuff like that. So, yeah, but when I look at AD&D, in most cases, it's a lot of rules that really don't add that much to the game. Unless you want to do lots of spreadsheets.
I never found that to be the case. The games are so, to me, honestly, so very, very alike. But it was, everybody knows I hate race as class. I want there to be, with certain exceptions, obviously no dwarven wizards, but I want the characters to be some of the most obvious basic choices. A dwarf cleric, that's like kind of a given.
So OSE
dwarven clerics.
So OSE advanced, which he kind of took like the best parts of advanced. He put that in there so you can do that. And
but
when I play,
can I do that now without dropping $250?
If you're paying $250, something's wrong with you.
Well, is it OSE or is it one of the other new clones that's like $250 to get everything you would need to play it?
So OSE, admittedly, I paid $200 to get everything, but that was all the carcass crawlers, all the little books, all the other stuff. But for the actual basic, it is. Let me go look up there. You need $2. And let's see. So I always fight about it. Let's see. The rules, you basically only need the advanced players and the advanced referees tome. And how much is the advanced players? So the advanced damn it, where is it? I have to go to Exalted Funeral. I think that it's only, if you want to buy them new, and I'm sure you can find them used, just like, and you're great at finding those, Shadow. Let's see. Here we go to the store. It's not that hard. I think it's like $40 for each or something like that. And
I can actually pull a pretty nice copy of the DMG or the Player's Handbook original for less than that plus shipping. For $100, I could pretty much find anybody a copy of the Monster Manual, Dungeon Master Guide, and Player's Handbook, and do the work yourself. I grew up having to do a lot of the work myself. If I didn't like something or I wanted to add something, I could do that and would do that, which, it is part of, for me, being a Dungeon Master. If you want to make a new world where these 8 rules I'm not using, put it in your book and let everybody know we're not using this stuff, and do it in you know, make it your own.
Yes. Well, I'm just saying that if you want and actually they do a really good job for binding, which is a problem that I have with a lot of them. It's not, whatever you want to do. I'm not knocking people for putting.
No, I read some of, I forget which one it is. I'm not going to say, but one of the new clones. I read it. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I already have this information in another book.
Absolutely.
Just written with different exact. It's not the exact specific words, but the rules are the same. So, you know what I mean? It's kind of the same freaking game.
I don't disagree with that at all. That's what I'm saying is. So, I mean, if you really did it, you get the little tiny books, which are kind of a pain in the ass. Now, I mean, the reason I wanted it is that I could hand them out to players because I don't expect players to buy the books. When you're talking about games, whatever game it is, there's so many games out there. The players should not have to buy any of the books until at least they've played probably 10 sessions. Once they've bought, if you're playing 10 sessions, then it's time for you to invest in the book. But yeah, I mean that's what it is.
I kind of agree with that,
Yeah.
to a point.
Okay.
If there's certain situations where I would, you want to show up, have the book.
Well, here's the thing: is I'm trying.
And mostly this is like with a sort of an age thing. If you can't afford the book because your allowance is about $5 a week, kind of thing. Gotcha. If you've been, playing these kinds of games for a good long time, shell out for the book. You don't like it, you can always trade it or you sell it or something like that. You're a freaking adult, But if you're brand new to the freaking hobby and you've never heard of Dungeons and Dragons until today, yeah, play it, see if you like it. Times are tough, but if you do, and you show up, and you're like, yeah, I'm digging this. Well, then go get the book, because I don't loan mine out.
So I know. So for the new printing, pretty much $40 for the player's book, and then what's going to be the next one? Probably very similar to the Advanced History. But that said, look, that's assuming that everyone plays that. The reality of it is that hey guys, let's play a Traveler game. Okay, let's play a Traveler game. If I really like the system, then I expect you to play it. I mean, as much as Bill likes GURPS, I'm not buying GURPS. I bought GURPS years ago. I don't really care for GURPS. It's, some of it is okay, we understand what the rules are. Let's just move that on. I don't have to know anymore. I'm not trying to optimize my characters. I'm not trying to do any of this. That's the problem sometimes is that I don't want the characters to be masters of rules. I would rather them to be masters of their actions. And they need to know what their actions are. But, like, for example, if we ever played DCC and you were playing a magic user, all I would, and I do this all the time, is I'd say, okay, here we go. I give you basic rules, which are probably like 10 pages. I give you only the spells you know, and I'll give you your critical hit tables. And I will put that into a little... which is usually got in my pocket, and I'll just bring it to you. You can create your own stuff, but that's what I keep with me. And I will bring a 3-ring binder that has all the rules you need to know, and say, okay, let's go. And then you're not flipping through 300 pages or whatever and get that analysis paralysis. No,
Yeah,
I mean,
pretty freaking massive.
It's like, look, here, you flip this one. Like, well, what can I do here? Here are your rules. Oh, okay. And then that's the problem I find with too much is, when the players are flipping through the player's handbook, and I don't know how you are, but I was always this way too. Oh, look, that's a cool looking spell. I wish I knew that one. Oh, look, this is what I'm doing. And like, no, I want you to just know what you have. And I think that's something that I wish D&D would do is just, hey, we'll just put out your individual, which I guess they have the spell cards now from, I forgot what it's called, but one of the game companies, what is it, Gale Force 9? They have
maybe I've actually got the second edition box sets of spell cards.
Yeah, I mean, spell cards to me are awesome for that. But no, but I don't expect players, and that's the other part too. Is that's one of the reasons I like the advanced fantasy players. Tell them, guess what? You only have to spend $40. You don't have to spend $80 and having $2. Oh, cool. And if they want it, that's great. If they don't, they don't have to get it. But I didn't want to get too much off of it because I like Darksun there. Um, that's yeah.
Absolutely, definitely an interesting setting,
I,
and what it was put together really well. It had AD&D had this kind of production quality back in the day. It would have lasted a lot longer before second edition,
I will
and
say
that was kind of a shame because the things that they change, a lot of the things they changed, besides just the artistic direction, there were a lot of things I did like about second, but it was just as easy to add them to first. But the things, I should say, some of the things they added to second, I really did not like at all.
the problem I had with second was it got too much bloat. But you're right. First and second were pretty much compatible. It was very easy to go from one to the other.
Yeah.
Actually, even BX and AD&D were pretty much compatible. The only thing I got when I look at AD&D, like I don't want to have to deal with weapon speed. I don't want to have to deal with some of this other stuff. It's much easier for me to say there's a slow one. And I agree with RPG game. Setting books can go through that. You find a system that works as long as that system works well. Goes through it. Like I said, I like Conan. I don't mind Darksun, but I like Darksun for the setting more than just the rules. But you know what? I had fun yesterday with OSC. I played one of the advanced character class or optional classes as a Beastmaster with 4 hit points. And do you know on how tough it is to fight a monster that it only had 8 hit points, but only 2 players have a magical weapon? That's and yet we won. We won, and it wasn't because we had magic missile or anything else. Fortunately, we had a couple 3rd level characters, but I think that's the other thing is, and I think players forget about this, is we talk about how deadly it is. Yes, but I remember hearing the White Box with Alexandria talking about apparently they used to farm characters in the old White Box days. So if you were a 5th level magic user, you would farm 1st level characters to get up to. And to be fair, a 5th level magic user is pretty close to an equivalent 2nd level magic user. They're pretty close, and you're like, oh, okay. And I think there's some of that. So but again, you play Darksun because you want to play Darksun. I think it's a great place to mine. If it isn't your setting, toss it. But I don't find.
Oh no, I learned a long time ago. Never get rid of anything.
No. I don't mean that way. What I mean is that. But you know what I mean is if it's not your setting, don't try forcing the setting into what you want to play. I think that's the problem that I had with 5e in particular. Is if I had to get the kind of game I want to play, I have to hack it so much that I'm better off just finding a different system or creating my own. And if that's the case, okay, then it's time to move on. I like the OSE stuff that they did with Advanced. And what they're doing is a little bit different. Anyone can become multi-classed, which is kind of cool. So humans can become multi-classed. And by the way, you're not limited to the number of character classes you're allowed to have. So if you want I want to be the cleric, magic user, fighter, thief.
I did run one of those.
You're allowed to do that. It just takes you 4 times as long to advance and level as a human.
Yeah, it was brutal. El, your last comment, I disagree. I did not ever see that with AD&D. For me, AD&D was, most people couldn't afford the extra stuff beyond the first 3 books, and everybody made up their own world. Other than Greyhawk, a lot of people bought into that. I played it for a while. I'm like, this is where I part ways with that sort of thing, and I make up all my own worlds. And from then, mind you, I was about 15. I've only played on my own worlds. I want to do it all. That's what being a dungeon master is all about. Is when you take out that first piece of paper and go, I'm making a world. That's when it really truly starts, and you really start to the learning process of how to be a great dungeon master. Maybe in your experience, but you played, what like White Box, L? Am I correct? Is that what you were talking about? What you played?
I think he did White Box and he moved to Basic, and he just stayed with Basic. To be fair, in retrospect, I think Basic is a better system. It's easier to run. It's easier for players to go through. the Dungeon Master's Guide, when you look at it, my
I don't know
God.
what people mean or you mean by easier. Maybe for easier for the DM, but for the players, it wasn't that much different. It really wasn't.
No.
What's in the player's handbook is perfect. There's some stuff that doesn't need to be there. There's some stuff that should be there, but for the most part, I found that the characters were more interesting and more unique because you had a lot of options. You know, the half orc, the half elf, even dwarves and elves had more that they could do than just I'm an elf. I hate that.
Well,
That's so simplistic. What if I want to run just an elf thief? Why not?
well, and part of it is, for me, I like that where it's limited, but the advanced fantasy allows you to do the other stuff. But to me, and I'm just talking about OSC here, that advanced fantasy took all the good things from AD&D and got rid of all of the other bloat that slows a lot of it down. To be fair, sometimes I think that Gygax just loved charts to charts and was just like, here, well, just shotgun all the charts. And to be fair, when I was young, I used to get all the Dragon magazines that I could. I had subscriptions to the Dragon magazine. I loved reading all that stuff. I remember the Freud number, which, to be fair, I didn't go back over Freud number until I went to college as an engineer, and we were discussing, how ships move through the water. But that's way too much overkill for the DM. I would rather DM focus on the world building and less on, okay, let me find the chart. Let me find this chart. Where's that chart?
Yeah.
We all joke with Saxius.
That's why the TMG is still a classic read for any dungeon master of any game. It really did have a lot of helpful, not just the charts, but just a lot of, other than the tricking of the players, helpful advice and the basic groundwork. It was the first book written for that I know of. Maybe RuneQuest or something else had one as well. To start building your own world, the whole chapter on building castles and hirelings and sages and all that stuff was really, really helpful, as well as the stuff on the different types of government with the explanations. Especially as a young kid, I was learning things from there that I should have learned through history. I didn't, but I learned it through there, and then I'm like, oh, okay, now I get it.
Well,
real simple.
Don't get me wrong. The Dungeon Master's Guide is something that I think that everyone should get to read and understand things. I think that, it's just like the 5e Dungeon Master's Guide. Whenever Crafty Man talks about that, the 5e one is actually a really good Dungeon Master's Guide, but no one reads it. All they do is they look over and they see the magic items, and that's about all they care about. Number one, and then number two is some of the optional rules, which is what I would use if I was going to do 5e. It's like, we don't have weapon proficiencies. We don't have this. Sometimes the problem that I had with 1E, and don't get me wrong, I love the Dungeoneer's Guide. I love the Wilderness Guide. But a lot of stuff would just slow things down if you added it into your game. But it was good to know. And it was, I think it's important to know these things or to have a lot of stuff already done in the background. But you don't have to have everything in there. That's why I said this. I loved all the first edition hardcover books. I did. I can't think of a single one I thought was bad, other than Unearthed Arcana, because I thought Unearthed Arcana was...
Love that book. Love that freaking book.
As a player, I did. In retrospect, I look at it, and there's a few good things in there, but I think it didn't make the game better.
The new spells, the new magic items, the social status charts, that stuff was good. The stuff on the spell books was really good. The character professions, that's iffy. Some people liked them, some people hated them. Some of the stuff was a little bit too powerful. Some of it was a little watered down. But the addition to the ranger, the addition to the druid, that stuff was solid. The cavalier, that's kind of iffy, but obviously the barbarian and the thief acrobat were. I thought the thief acrobat was a little too watered down with trading off the things you really need to be a thief. Was kind of flashy.
Here's my view, and I know that we get the encyclopedia, is I think they should have stuck with the basic 4 classes, and that's it. And then once you hit which they kind of did with 1E, with 5E, But I thought once you should have hit 5th or 7th level, then you can go pick one of the specialty classes. Because I don't think you should start off as a paladin. I think you should start off as a fighter, and then once you got up to a certain level,
with the paladin, you had the pre first level stuff, which I think was a great way to do it in some ways. Start out, you start out as a pre first level paladin in a first level party.
Well, that's under if they're canon. I'm saying just overall for AD&D, I think that they should have had it is when you go up to 5th level, then you could branch out from there and like I can now become a ranger. I can now become a paladin, and it would have made it like, oh my god, you're facing a paladin. You became a paladin.
I could
yes.
With rangers,
with the barbarian, it's to me you should have. That's when it should have branched out. Is look, everyone's a fighter. It's only when you get up to those higher things can you become that.
I disagree with that. Knowing what I know about the people in the real world that I would consider rangers, they didn't start out as fighters. They started out kind of the opposite, more of like a scout, almost a rogue class that sort of worked their way into being able to fight better because they had endured life in the wilderness type of thing.
Well,
and the idea of starting out as either a first level paladin or ranger, I really like those ideas because they were less fighterly, not more fighterly.
Well, no, see, that's the whole thing.
Well, not the paladin, but the ranger.
The ranger was considered a fighter class.
No, I totally get that.
And that's my whole point is one is the player would have known what they're getting into, and it would have allowed them to branch off when they're. It also, a lot of it just is, I want the players to actually know how to play what they're doing, and then they'll look forward to something as they go up in level. I don't want it to just be, oh, I'm going to do this. No, you're going to get up there first, and then you can split off. Which that's just a different philosophy. And like Dungeon Minister said, in Old Beckme, which is the Will Cyclopedia, you did that at 9th level. That's what I want. I want it simple at the beginning for players to learn their characters, and then you could specialize, and then you become like, oh, you still got to get the basics. Every engineer still has to learn the same stupid basic stuff, and we don't. It's not until we get to the.
But see, I always looked at the ranger as sure they were fighters, but the other stuff, the tracking and the hunting and the woodcraft and things like that, I could see more as the people that live near town but not technically in town. We have people like that now. They're called rednecks, and ask Hungar and DM James. They probably had some rangerly skills at a very, very young age that an actual fighter can't get, and to think that they'd only get that after a much older age and after having gone through hand-to-hand combat and weapon and armor training and things like that, whereas the rangers were kind of encouraged to not really wear things above chainmail, whereas a fighter that's more of a soldierly kind of class, the way I saw it, as where they came from a military family and they didn't have time for the ranger skills because that was left to other people.
Well, that's why.
What have you?
But see, you think of class as profession. That to me, I look at class as role. That's your role in a party. And then the other part that comes into it is if we're talking about old Beckme stuff, and actually the first edition AD&D, when we didn't have any of this stuff, you rolled versus attribute. And that's the way, to me, a lot of the things should be.
That's in the military, L. In great portions of the world, there are people who aren't that great a fighter but have all of the ranger skills, the hunting, the tracking, the woodcraft, the survival training, things like that. In the military, it's totally different. You're right.
Okay. But again, from a game standpoint, this is why I understand the proficiencies. When they threw in the proficiency, I thought they did a bad job. This is why I like 5e in this aspect. You kind of pick what you're going to be, and then you go from there. And I always viewed it as it's not that the players couldn't track. It was on how well did they track past that. But I wanted it to be special. You got to learn your basic class first before you start going into any specialty classes. And that's one of the reasons that I felt like with Beckme, like Dungeon Minister said, is it's as you go up. But but it also would have kept out a lot of the bloat. That's the problem I really had with, like, I enjoyed first edition. There wasn't that much bloat. Everything was unique for the most part. We did get with Unearthed Arcana. But as soon as you went to second edition, they had some great books in there. But as a money churning thing, how many fighter class do you need? Don't get me wrong. I enjoyed the complete Elves Handbook. I enjoyed the
I've
complete
got
Dwarves Handbook.
90% of them here. And I agree, but I think that's one of the reasons why I think it was called Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. It was for people who had played some of the previous editions and were ready to take like a little bit more advanced, more complicated step into the hobby of at the time, which was Dungeons and Dragons, and had played the other games and like, well, why can't I do this? Why can't I do that? Here comes Advanced, and here's how you do all that stuff that you couldn't do in some of the previous editions. For people who'd gotten past the beginner level that you were talking about, learn the 4 basic food groups. Well, yeah, I've done that. Now I don't want to start out as a fighter and then by like 4th or 7th level I can start training or doing some rangerly stuff, because you can still do that with AD&D. You could
do that in 1E. I mean, with basic.
Yeah.
The whole problem that I had with it is, how do I want to put this? It's a lot of the DMs were taught to say no if it wasn't explicitly in there, and I see this a lot in 5e players. Whereas as we get older, it's kind of like, and this is why, look, you can't. When I say you can't climb a sheer surface, that doesn't mean you can't climb a tree. But man, I saw so many times when you can't climb a tree. What do you mean I can't climb a tree? It's like, well, you're a fighter. You can't climb a tree. Only thieves are allowed to climb. That's not what it says. It says sheer
actually, before the proficiencies that were in the Dungeoneers and Wilderness Survival Guide and the Oriental book, things like that, it was just a stat check.
That's my point. It's just supposed to be a stat check. But I remember playing, and it was, you don't have climbing, you can't do this, and I was like, no. Anyway, there's a reason
proficiencies kind of screwed that up for the game. Admittedly, when they put that in, it was suddenly you could never do this, which wasn't the case. It was really just a bonus or lack of a negative to do some of those things. Mind you, some of the more complicated things were, different, and they really should have had a higher cost for things like shipwright. Oh, really? Because I suddenly went up a level, I can take shipwright? No.
Well, that's why like I said, is I like how 5e does it. Is you've already picked, you pick your class, but then they have a profession. If you can tell to the dungeon master that this is a skill in your profession, like let's say, hey, I'm a sailor, and you say, hey, look, I know how to tie knots, and this is the optional rule in there. Oh yeah, your sailor should know how to tie knots. Hey, I know how to swim. Yeah, your sailor would know how to do that. Hey, I know how to trek on land. No, your sailor doesn't know how to do that. That's what, but I like that a lot better, and what they would, but that's what 5e allows it to do. That's not the way a lot of players or DMs are doing it, and I think that's a real travesty, because I agree with you, is characters have more skills, which is why, when I went over and I saw the problem sometimes with Traveler, this is one of the reasons I liked Star Frontiers or a lot of the skill-based systems. And I'm still a big skill-based system person. I don't want to look at it otherwise, but A&D is a level-based system. So you take what you get with it. Yeah. But I think the problem is that too many DMs, and again, I bought every hardback I could, and it would take me 3 weeks to save up enough money to buy one hardback. But it was only $10. It was only $10 or $12. I mean,
they were 15 at my local shop for the Player's Handbook, Monster Manual. DMG.
Oh, they were $19.90. Looking at the old stuff, it was $9.95 when we would buy them. But I mean, but that kind of thing is, I wish that more. But I remember going over. You can't climb. You can't do this. And instead of saying, "Hey, roll your stat check," which is what we should have done, and that's where I felt that it should have been, "Hey, this is a special thing on top of it," and that's why I think that there's a lot of unnecessary rules. This is where I actually agree with Al. Don't let him know. But yeah.
No, I'm looking forward to actually having L on my show someday.
Yeah.
Even if he doesn't want to use a camera. I'm not sure what you mean by skills are trash. I think the game would have been better if it started out with more And when it comes to making a fire, if you're playing in a fantasy medieval type scenario, I think fire building is like one of the first things your parents teach you is how to get the fire started. Maybe you're rich enough to own a tinderbox, and they didn't really teach you anything other than how to use the tinderbox. But the difference between knowing how to start a fire is way different than first aid or some of the other skills. I think the prices and proficiencies was wacko jacko. Some things were just ridiculous. Why this one costs one, this one costs two. There's no way you're going to convince me that certain skills were equal to one another in a 1-to-1 basis. Like this one costs you one, this one costs you one. It was just, there should have been like half costs, or you get more proficiency slots, or non-weapon proficiency slots, and make some of the skills actually cost like 5 or 10 proficiency points or something like that, because they just weren't balanced in the way and what it takes to learn the skill in the amount of time. You can go to a survival class and you're going to learn that fire building skill like the first hour of the first day, and then you're going to spend the next 16 hours of that class doing a whole lot of other stuff.
But again, that's where I
skill.
That's why I wish what they had done is said, hey, what's your setting, and you either get and this is what they've been doing with 5e, and I may not always agree with it, but with the OSC game, depending on how hard it is how many dice you roll. A simple one is 2d6. You have to roll below that. 3d6 if it's kind of a challenge. 4d6 if it's very hard. 5d6 if it's almost impossible. And you just have to, that's an easy way of doing it. And I would much rather them say, guess what? If you pick a profession, just tell me what your profession is. This is before you went out adventuring. What is your profession? Oh, you know what? I'm this. Okay, if you can show me that skill would relate to it, we knock it down one level. That to me is an easy way of doing it. I agree with you about weapon proficiencies. That's why you got Palladium doing their individual skills. And then I still complain because they start, you have light navigation versus regular navigation and blah, blah, blah. I mean, really? You get this one versus, why wouldn't you have both? Oh, no, I said, wait a minute. The question is, are you good or not? And I think that's why.
Welcome to the show, Guardian.
That's why I like the idea of some proficiencies, but it got kind of ridiculous with D&D where they started going through it. I liked it just in the old one where it says, hey, you get a certain number of languages, and I would have much preferred them to say, guess what? You get one non-weapon proficiency per level, and if you get something outside of your class, and each of the classes would have had non-weapon proficiencies. If you get something that's one level over, guess what? So you can put a little chart. If you get one level over, it costs 2. If you get 2 levels over, it costs 3. And I thought that would have been a lot better. Hey, Nathan. Yeah. That's the way I would have done it and said. But the problem that we have is D&D is a very
hindsight is 2020.
No, D&D is a very imperfect system, and at a certain point, it was based off of a war game. They played it like a war game initially, and then the role playing just got more and more in there, and that's why. Not that I read the really old stuff. You can see where D&D is evolving. Why did you have to have a gravedigger as its own class? That to me was ridiculous. Or, well, they did, and then they had.
What was this in what game?
That was in AD&D.
Was that like a Dragon Magazine thing?
Yes. So they had a politician.
A lot of that stuff I think was kind of like for a one-off sort of situation. You run into this one gravedigger who's actually like the magic old man in so many stories where he knows a lot more than you think he does, and he's pivotal to moving the story along because of his help. No worries, Dungeon Mister. I'm actually getting ready to call it. It's been 2 hours almost. I'm going to call it in about 9 minutes.
Okay, I'm going to mention.
Nathan and Guardian get here just as we're closing.
I'm going to mention one other thing, though, since we're talking about D&D is, you can take the survival aspect and let's flip this around and say, okay, you know what? You're not on Athos, you're on Hoth equivalent. and now you have to deal with ice. And
Well, that's very similar to what I'm doing with my world. It's basically like a water world, like Pirates of Dark Water. You
yeah,
know, a complete nautical game. There's obviously going to be land, but it's very sparse, much less than here on Earth. Probably only 10 or 15% land mass with 2 poles. And I'm actually going to do a little bit of a video, maybe even series on the world that I'm building, because I want to get to play the game I've always wanted to play, and even if it's only as a DM. The greatest advice I can give people as a dungeon master is run the game you wish you could be in. That way you look at it from their point as well. It's like, oh man, I wish it would be like this. Well, then make it like that, so the players, you get to, experience what you would like to experience, and you get to, vicariously, enjoy it from, your seat behind the screen, but you get to, enjoy what they're doing, because chances are you're never going to get to be in that game that you would write and then someone else would run for you. It's the closest you're going to get to that. But maybe if you run the game that you want to play in, someone else will pick up the torch and go, you know what, I like that, I'm going to do it a little bit different. Hey, you want to play? And you'd be like, hell yeah, sea monsters and mermaids and sirens and storms at sea and boarding actions and, like Elle says, ship to ship combat. If you're not into it, that's cool. That's one of my big passions when it comes to gaming. I have, ships in the sea and Don't Give Up the Ship, and I've played Man of War extensively. But I want to be down on the deck level, watching the players go from island to island, like in Voyage of the Dawn Treader, and experiencing little one-off dungeon experiences, where I can do, okay, you find this island out in the middle of nowhere. It's not on any map. You send away, a couple of longboats with people to go explore it, maybe look for fruit, food, fresh water, and lo and behold, there's the ruins of an ancient temple. Okay, well, you send a few party members in to go explore it, and boom, instant dungeon.
and see, I don't disagree with Guardian there, going to every planet in the solar system, but each one's a totally extreme environment. I don't disagree with that. I think those are cool. For I just don't, like you're talking about. I love the nautical. You know what I would do? Because I steal shamelessly. It would be basically Pirates of the Caribbean with no continents around you, and mix it in with what's the other one that's out there? The Hawaiian Islands. I said, okay, cool, because that gives you enough space that you can put populations out there, but you can spread things out by a couple 100 miles and go, okay, not everything has to be the giant world. We're going to travel 100. I'm going to joke about, but you're going to travel around the world. Not everything has to be 10,000 miles away. I actually like
Right.
it's a bit smaller.
And now, if that's not your cup of tea, no worries. I disagree. I think it sounds like a lot of fun. And those guys who did that back on Earth, in the real world, and spent most of their life on a ship, those guys had some big brass, what's, to be able to do that. That's terrifying. I've been on boats, and it's, no matter how good a swimmer you are, if you're on the ocean, you're only going to be able to do that for so long before it's curtains.
Here's my suggestion: is go look at how big the I don't know if you've ever been next to it, the Santa Maria. Look at how big that ship is. It's only like 50 feet long.
I know.
It's tiny. People have no conception of, just because I was on a U.S. naval ship, a frigate. That thing's like 400 feet long, and that's considered small. And boy, you get these little small ships, and you're going, look, we've got yachts bigger than this, and here they are with 40, 50 people on it, and they're all in there, and they have cannons and other stuff in there. Yeah. But this is the other thing I would love to do, a little bit different. And I know this is actually, I think Warhammer does pretty good, because no one screams all the time. Is their whole you can do the conquistador. You can be a conquistador, but you're fighting against lizardmen, so you don't get everyone screaming about everything. About
I'm doing the same thing, and I've been doing that since way back in the old days. I absolutely love that idea. Very Conan-esque, if you think about it. You come to the island, it appears to be deserted. Then you find this, ancient ruins, and you can't read the writing, and you find some stairs down. And next thing you know, you're tussling with lizard men. To me, that sounds like a great time. And then you defeat some lizard men, you haul off some treasure, you come back to the ship, and everybody's like, cheering for you. And what a better way, or what a great way to make the players have to like, okay, Captain, here's the treasure, okay, well, everybody gets a certain share type of thing. So you're not really like overloading the players, but at the same time, training's free because someone on the ship will train you, stuff like that. And just do it completely different, because of all of the versions of AD&D, I've never seen what I'm trying to, run.
You know what though?
It might be, but I can't think of one.
Well, I thought, because exactly what you're saying to me is not a new idea. I've always thought about that too, but I don't understand why they don't do a Pirates of Dark Water equivalent, or things like that. It seems like it's such low-hanging fruit, and the problem that I have nowadays is they just
Kind of is.
Well, I know this much. Is Exalted did that with the West, where you do, if you go in the West direction, you have that exactly kind of thing with the complete gonzo stuff. The problem is that you have to deal with the rules for Exalted. But
you see, with the portal thing, guys, that's like really high magic in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And I want to keep it, not saying that we won't get to high magic, but I want it to be, at least feel, difficult. And I don't actually plan on doing the pirate thing. I'm going to try and keep the players not pirates. I want them to fight pirates all the time. But when you just say, "Oh, there's a portal here," that's too easy for me. I want them to, to have to do the difficult things. I want to be able to narrate, some of the nights or days at sea, and not every single one and bore them like it's a Tolkien novel, for folks who aren't into that sort of narration. But I want to, give them the idea that, hey, you know what? There's a whole lot to do, and it doesn't always have to be land bound. And
Shadow,
do some of the, there's some great monsters. Who doesn't want to fight, a sea monster or a freaking giant kraken like in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, or some of the other things from the Sinbad movies, Harryhausen movies.
Well, here's the thing is everyone talks about, no, you don't understand. It's just like, because I know you talk about Traveler, and then actually you can do something very similar with Darksun, except Darksun uses caravans rather than the ship. But everyone seems to be just missing.
Exactly, Mar.
It just seems that everyone forgets that self-contained, whatever's on that ship, your ship becomes its own character, very similar to Traveler, and the players have an invested interest into said ship. And the other part is it allows for troop play. Obviously, Bell just, he needs to eat ginger, because ginger was the one thing on what was it called? That's like with me, with Darksun. Nothing but desert everywhere you look for 2 months. Getting from point A to point B. Well, with me, with the ocean, because they both should be terrifying in their own way, but I've never got to do that as a player or a DM, to run the sea monster encounters. There's going to be weeks where I'm just like, a week goes by, nothing eventful, and get to the eventful part. I don't need to bore them with rolling every day, for a week and nothing happens. No, I don't need to do that. Well,
I can take 7 dice and go, nothing happened for a week.
Actually, Shadow, right? The other thing you can do is you can do that rolling before they ever start playing. And so guess what?
I know. That's one of our secrets.
No. I just mean everyone seems to act like you can't go through. It's like, look, you can fast forward through certain things. And also use like anyone that have played Harpoon, you go like times 64 speed, like, and then also you slow down as soon as something interesting happens.
Sorry. Folks are having fun with Nathan's Monty Python Stargate reference. Nice one, Nathan.
Darksun has your caravans. That's basically your land trains. Oh, and then they have the giant sand crawlers. But
I saw that one picture of that giant sand thing with those big long ass wheels. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's kind of cool,
Well,
but yeah, it's also gonna be hot, stinky, and smelly inside, and you can't wait for it to to stop so you can get out, stretch your legs, and take a whiz in the sand.
So this is what it really comes down to. The real problem that Shadow has with Darksun is that people don't bathe daily. If they bathe daily, he would view it as okay. It's worth.
It's not the only thing. I do not like togas. I do not like sandals, and I do not like low tech fantasy. I want hinges, and I want metallurgy, and I want actually most of my D&D games actually eventually evolve into like a Western era, and I kind of try to halt the technology at a Wild West, but mixed with six guns and sorcery and stuff like that. I had a really successful game where that was in fact the case, where the guy calls you out into the middle of the street. Well, he might have a six gun, but you got a wand of magic missiles or something like that. Just totally mix the two genres that most people don't want to mix, but I not. I mean, Deadlands had such a nice long run. Why not just put the era back a little, throw in some elves and dwarves and a dragon or two? Why not? It's fantasy.
Well, see, some of the stuff that I enjoy is that's why I like Warhammer Fantasy. Is just kind of the Renaissance level. But which reminds me, I got my 9 books I ordered, so I'm just waiting for the Sea of Claws because it does the nautical. I really do like the nautical aspect because it allows the players to move and have a home base, and they are forced to protect it. And it's like, look, if your base gets attacked, because that's what a ship is, you're going to protect it. And if you lose it, it's just like Star Trek 3 when he looks over and he sees the Enterprise, going down and he's stranded.
It's funny you mentioned that. Our friend Grim to See is actually carving me, or going to carve me, a model of the player's ship, so that I can use it on the board. When because we're going to do it on a Zoom call or something. But I can put it down there, and I can actually do some naval, combat. Where the players may be trying to run away from the pirates or try to maneuver the ship to get that broadside attack, because the ship is going to be a base, like I mentioned, with training and different things, so that I can siphon their money, but they're going to get their training for free where available from different members of the crew, and I'll be able to have different members of the crew as the NPCs, but I'll have a finite city or town that they travel around with, for these voyages, that I can really get into the NPCs and not constantly be making up, a random NPC. I'll have a list of, maybe even 100 crew member that are obviously going to get picked off. But when they get picked off, it's going to mean something. When someone, gets taken by the squid and dragged down into the ocean, people are going to be bummed. When the battle's over, they're going to be like, we lost, Mickey, or Joey or whatever, I want them to feel it and get attached to it, because someday, who knows, one of them might be captain.
Well, the other part is, and this is where you're talking about taking stuff from Darksun, is having that troop style play where you pick 4 characters. Well, yes, because it's always Atlanta. Did you ever watch Futurama? But no, that's what I mean is that if you do the troop play,
Jackie's gonna love your sense of humor.
But I mean, if you're going to do the troop play like they have in Darksun, where you have 4 characters that are all waiting and you rotate them around. If your character gets wounded, then you have to send another one on shore. Things like that. That's what though is if you just bred them, you don't have to worry about Krakens. They're very
well.
tasty.
Not only that, this is going to also allow me to have like a large pool of players who can and can't make it.
Yes.
Oh, you can't make it? Okay, well you're staying on the boat, or maybe you're guarding the rowboats while the rest of the people go. I can still put you in there, but I'm not going to give you a bunch of free XP because you missed a night or a couple of nights. Oh, you're on the boat. You're swabbing the deck. Sorry, you couldn't make it. You're not getting free XP. I freaking hate that crowd. Okay,
well,
if you're not there, you don't get squat. Sorry, unless you let somebody run your character, then you're not there.
Well, part of it is I understand why people use their what they call the milestone stuff. I do. And that's, I think part of it is what the game that Gygax.
You want in, Grandma?
Well, but yeah, no, but see, that to me is exactly like you're saying. That's what makes it so great. Is you can do that. Guess what? You have to reach a certain level before you become anything more than a ship hand. But if you have the Darksun stuff, we have 4 or 6 characters each. Let's be honest. You can have 10 to 12 players, and they each have 6 characters. It's like, well, what happened during this battle? Well, you lost, poor Bob. Not Bob. He was our cook.
No, that's James L. James L's already. He wants to be the Hobbit cook, and I knew it. Ask him. I knew when I was telling him about my game. I'm like, so you want in? He's like, yeah. Let me think about it. And I was like, the next time I saw him, he's like, I want to run it, and I already knew what he wanted to run. It was going to be a Hobbit cook, for the galley, and of course, I'm going to have to find ways to drag him into some adventures when all he wants to do is maybe, work on the herb garden and cook up the meals for the crew. But,
well,
something's going to happen to that little squirt.
That's the other part too is, we would talk about huge amounts. You don't have to have huge amounts of treasure that you give the players. You just have to give them enough experience points and enough treasure that they can improve whatever they're getting. But, when they go on shore, hey, we have to buy all new food and everything else. But yeah, no, RPG Grandma, giant squids, giant, megalodons.
And don't forget the sea serpent with the weird guy riding on the back who speaks a funky language. Anybody know where that's from?
All I can think of is the I don't know where the funky language is. All I could think was of Rick and Morty, where they have.
I'll give you another hint. It's German.
Oh, geez. It's been a while.
If you guys don't know that book, go out and buy some Fritz Lieber. Last hint.
Oh, well, so, okay, that's why I would never get that. But no, the other part is this is one of the things I love about Darksun, and a little bit different is Fire and Ice has its own Kickstarter right now. There is nothing better. This is why when I hear Bear says he doesn't like dinosaurs, there's nothing better that I love in Fire and Ice is when they fly into the glacier on the pterodons. I'm like, that is just awesome. But
I've got the floating islands. I actually have a place on my oldest of game maps that actually has a place called the Floating Islands. I've got it all. I've got Megalodon. I've got sunken cities, mermaids, and sirens, and every one of the tropes. Think about it, guys. Just from an AD&D perspective, you got 3 monster manuals, right? Monster Manual 1, 2, and Fiend Folio. How many of those critters are only found at sea, and you never probably bumped into them? And if you did, it was like once or twice. There's all kinds of the sea versions of things like ghouls and things like that.
Crabmen. I love the crabmen. The stuff just on shore. Crabmen, Sahagwin, merfolk. The what's the
Tritons.
There's the version of hobgoblins that are under the water. I forgot what they're called.
Oh yeah, or the Ixatzakil, the little manta ray freaking spellcasters. I mean, how terrifying would that be? And not to mention the absolute endless supply, because it's let's call it a post-apocalyptic D&D world where the ocean levels rose. How many sunken cities are down there just waiting to be, mined like crazy for all the goodies? You get the right wizard or two who can give you the water breathing or the airy water, and you go down and do all that cool shit. Come on, guys.
No, that's what I love about those things. That's why I think that there's so many places that open up. But I have to mention, if it's post-apocalyptic, it's because they couldn't stop everyone using their wood-fired pizza ovens, and that's why everything sank. No, I think that why don't they use more sea tropes? It's a wonderful thing in there. To be fair, it's the only one I've really seen them do a good job. Did they have it under the old? 1 second here. I think I have it somewhere.
Because I have the of the Ships in the Sea for the 2nd edition, Splat books.
Yeah,
dude, I that book was at like $100 before I finally found one for like $30 ish. Oh man, I was tracking that book down forever, and you know what? The book is weak as hell. I already knew everything in it and had better rules, and I'm just like, shelve it. And now, good luck even finding a copy. I don't know what it is. It's probably a lot cheaper now, but like I said, I'm going to run the game I wish I could have been on or been in, and maybe someday someone will be like, "Yeah, dude, that game was great. I'm going to run a game like that. You want to be in it?" And that'll be,
So it didn't sell well, but apparently that was one of the ones for Exalted that I enjoyed a lot because it actually someone did a lot of research on how ships actually work and positions and everything else, and it never sold well. What I managed to, but I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it because I felt like I learned something. I think,
Guardian. It's really a matter of opinion. For for a part of it, you can use the books together if you wanted. I went through the progression as it came out, like kind of like watching the Star Wars movies. I played 1E. Oh, 2E's coming out. Let's check it out. Well, I've been playing 1E for a decade or so. 2E came out, and I went, I kind of like 1E better. There's some cool stuff in 2E, like the Thief, the way they did the Rogue. That was freaking genius. But what they did to other things, wasn't a fan. It's really going to be a matter of taste. If you ever want to get into either of them, or maybe you want to grab one of the newer, retro clone kind of games. All that matters is you get out there and you game.
I'm going to mention this for Darksun. For Darksun, you need your basic books, your Dungeon Master's Guide, your Player's Handbook, plus the Darksun stuff. But you also need the Psionic Handbook. Without the Psionic Handbook, you're going to be missing out on a lot for that. Those are things that your characters, if you play in Darksun, are going to be much more powerful than the same equivalent level, except they aren't going to have as good of equipment as the players normally would. That said, is once you get up to probably about 20th level, because let's be honest, as you get up there, you're going to have probably the same equivalent equipment, and then your Darksun characters are going to be much more powerful than your equivalent there.
Second edition characters.
Yeah, it's second. Well, no, I mean for second edition is the same character level, so it could still be much more powerful. Yeah, no, I mean that's good. Like I said, I like Darksun. It's not everyone's cup of tea. Is obviously like Shadow because he wants a more technologically. But if you want to play something that's more Neolithic with that exploration aspect to find lost technologies where you can find metal,
it does have that kind of Gamma World appeal to it. However, from reading it, I could see where a lot of GMs would be less inclined to even go there, letting you find the cool stuff. I'm assuming a lot there. Maybe there's a lot of GMs are like, oh, yeah, we just still, almost any time they found treasure, it was good stuff,
Well, it should be that, and they do have the treasure tables, and the treasure tables do have, well, you're saying it sucked because you keep on thinking, well, you have to get all this gold and stuff. No, that the whole point no. I mean, if you start thinking a ceramic piece is equivalent to gold piece, then it's not that it sucks.
What I mean, Omen, is if you take the Monster Manual treasure type table and you take the DMG from second edition table, they're the same table, except the percentages are all the same, but the results on the end, what you get is half or less of what you used to get in first edition, and that was part of their intention, was to make it harder to progress for whatever reason, partially by giving you less treasure when you did the things.
Well, so looking at all game design, experience is what you want to encourage people to do. So I admit second edition wanted you to play your character, so you got experience for doing that. The other problem that you had with it is I don't think that, and someone correct me, it's been a while, 2E, I don't think that they gave you experience points for getting gold.
Some people did, some people didn't, mostly just rogues. Whereas in the old days, if you found a way as a party to steal the treasure without fighting the monster, you got the XP. If you fought the monster and got the treasure, you got the XP. All of which allowed for players in first edition to advance much faster than second edition, and that's fine. But everything else was also geared toward being a little harder in second edition. The reduction of, like, for example, a fireball damage topping out at 10d6, whereas your 15th level magic user in AD&D could do 15d6 fireball.
So I actually like the fact that they capped it for a very good reason, which is your third level spells are becoming better than your Meteor Swarm, which was a 9th level spell.
I understand that, but they should have just done the opposite and made the Meteor Swarm do more damage.
No. For me, what they should have done in the opposite was what they should have said is if you want to cast Fireball as a higher level spell, which is what 5th edition does. Oh, if you want to cast as a 4th level spell, then it does this. If you want to cast as a 9th level spell, it does this. But to be fair, why in the world didn't they just do that in the first place? It's like, hey guys, you got Meteor Swarm. Guess what? It acts like we're just going to do a 9th level Fireball, and it's on how much power you want in there. But
honestly, I know why. Because Gygax said no player should ever make it above 11th level, but NPCs should be all kinds of levels, and giving them a damaging spell that's like 7th or 8th or 9th level, they didn't want it to be just a freaking one spell party kill kind of thing.
Well, no. What
like
my point
like
was
an
is
18th
that
level magic user lich or vampire, he'd have some really badass high level damage spells. When all, like you said, all he had to do was go fireball the whole party. There's nothing but ashes.
Well, no. What I meant is that
even if they made
cast
their
a 9th level Fireball spell instead of a 3rd level Fireball spell. That's what I'm referring to. Why do you have to create a new spell equivalent? That's what I was referring to. It's like, hey, guess what? When you get 3rd level, you can also cast it as a 4th or 5th or 6th or 7th or 8th or 9th, and here's your damage that you're allowed to do from that.
No. You got XP for whatever the GM decided you got XP for, including combat, clever thinking, treasure, magic items. It wasn't just you get it only for gold. You could get the XP for the gold if you killed the monster or if you stole the treasure or found a way to trick the monster out of it. But you could also get XP for avoiding a monster instead of fighting a monster.
Well, see, BX,
there were a lot of different ways.
But BX
it just wasn't as codified as it was in second edition.
Well, in BX, they gave you generally BX and Advanced. If you actually read the rules, it basically, you can change some of it. Combat, which was crap, and then gold. It was equivalent gold, and that's what. And in fact, I would actually change the rules to how much gold do you spend. It's not how much gold do you get; it's how much gold do you spend, and that's when you get the XP. So it's like, oh, I'm rich. Yeah, you're rich, but you don't get any experience points, so you start spending that money. So that's the way I would have handled it. But that would have encouraged training and things like that. But no, 1E, it gives you specific for certain, factors. But and that's fine. Like most things, your experience points is what you want to encourage players to do. And
that was one of the great things about 2E is, the way it codified certain things. But it turned out that, like, for spell casting, I just gave 100 per level of the spell, as opposed not just every time you cast it, but when you cast it meaningfully.
Yes.
Whereas they went, okay, you get 50, which it was never a rule in first edition, that you got it at all. That was just me. So giving 50 at least made it, a guarantee. It's like, yeah, I'm using my spells, and I'm going to find legitimate ways, not just to blast off a light spell because I'm bored and it's still memorized, so I want the free 100 XP. Otherwise, characters would go up freaking so fast, make your head spin. But the other things that it did in second edition, the other, the list of, a fighter gets it for this, this, and this, thieves get it for this, this, and this, and it's still left open. Well, you did this clever thing during the game, or your role played really good. I'm giving you a bonus XP, because that's always been a thing.
So that's like everything else. Just depends on how fast you want your characters to get in there. Let's see. I'm just going through here, looking through. Okay, that's page 45. Because I'm trying to look at what the actual rules say, and that's the Let's be honest. We did this enough that I always changed rules whenever I was going through it. Okay. Character survival. Let's see. And then individual experience points has a clever idea, 50 to 100. Player has an idea that saves the party, 100 to 500. Player role plays his character well, 100 to 200. Player encourages others to participate, 1 to 200. Defeating a creature in single combat, XP value of the creature. And And then they have the difference between warriors, priests, and rogues. So it was in there, but I do like the fact that you want to encourage them in there. And then it gives you the option.
Arduin had the same thing before AD&D did. It had actually a really extensive list of things, like how much you got for dying, or bringing somebody back to life, or things like that. As well as Palladium, almost verbatimly copied the Arduin XP table. It was really interesting to see how different DMs interpreted those kinds of rules, or what they did. You could kind of tell the DMs that gave you really wimpy XP when you guys busted your ass, it kind of gave you a sort of a yardstick to determine how long it was going to take you to get to the next level or whatever. And some people don't want to advance fast, some people kind of do, but inevitably you get to that point where it's going to take forever to go up a level, and that's when you forget about that crap and just do and focus on what's at hand, which people in the real world don't worry about going up levels. So why would your characters think about that sort of thing unless it's a real big promotion, or something, when you hit this sort of milestone in your life, you're now going to be able to do this stuff, like when kids turn 18 and 21. So handle it however you want.
So this is what it has in here, which, to be fair, so I'm going through 2E. It's been years since I looked at this. You get a story award, which says it shouldn't be worth more than approximately the XP of the monsters. And then the other point is that you can give 1 XP per gold if you want. A lot of these things I just think is that, to be fair, 2E really encouraged more ways to give experience, but it's your game. Play it how you want.
Right. Well, it was also the second edition was also, where they actually started talking about role playing.
Yes.
Despite what Sean may say, it was a role playing game. If it says the word role playing in it, that's what it means.
Well, like everything else, and I know is some people like to roll dice. They do. They want to roll dice, and I'll be honest, I have done it at times. I know whenever you want to just go, I'll be fine. But when I was DMing as a kid, there were times I said, "Look, we'll just narrate it because you're fighting an orc. I'm not going to roll the actual dice. You're going to win against an orc, okay? You're 10th level. I'm not going to worry about that." And not dice, or when it seems like when it should be nail-bitingly close. I'm not just going to roll to roll. I think sometimes that just slows the game down. Okay, here's what goes on. Players slow the game down enough, and I don't want oh my God, we all know this person. The person that gets analysis paralysis, that decides to play the high-level magic user and now can't make a choice of what spell they cast, and they kind of freeze, and you're just like, you should be playing a fighter, just a fighter. Because, I'll be honest for myself, and I'm not always bad, is usually I make a decision, and I'm going to stick with it unless something changes on what action I'm going to do. That's, I already know what I'm going to do 2 or 3 rounds ahead if I can. And that helps. But that's the other part, and that's why I agree with Legion of Myth on this. If you slow leveling helps the players learn. That's the problem I've been finding with 5e. Talk to my friend, not that I played it for a little bit. Players are advancing so quickly, they aren't learning their characters. And it just gets worse and worse as they go up level by level. So
that really depends on the table. If you've got a bunch of newbies, cool, fine.
They aren't newbies. They aren't newbies. The problem is that if you play a slightly different character class or something. I mean, if you play the magic user year after year after year, the magic user. But
that's what I mean.
But I'm saying, you know what? I've been playing a fighter. I play a magic user, but I've played a magic user for a year. Let me go change to a cleric. But they still aren't learning everything because they are advancing so quickly. that they really don't have time to even learn their abilities and what they can do with them. And then, of course, like everyone talks about dipping into classes. You're just like,
Again,
no.
that's assuming, that you're not playing with some rather experienced players, and I don't see why you should penalize the advanced players. That's how you get rid of advanced players from your game, is you saddle them up with these assumptions that they don't know what the hell they're doing, even though, well, maybe if you don't know them that well, you might want to put them through a probationary period. But if you know them and you've been gaming with them, yeah, you can in AD&D in one combat, or one encounter, get enough XP to go to the freaking third level, and holding back on that just because you don't trust them or you don't want it to go that, then that's not really the game for you, because it does have these rules. It's like, hey, I found this item, I now know how to use it, I want the freaking XP.
Well. Here's the thing: as a DM, you get to decide what's inhabiting your.
Oh, absolutely. But if you're going to always make rulings against the players as opposed to in favor or with them, then you're going to find your tables emptier and emptier.
Sure. Well, that's true of anything, but that's why that's why you always need the player buy-in. If the players don't want to play in your Darksun campaign, don't force them. If your players don't want to play in the Ravenloft campaign, don't force them. At the end of the day, yeah.
That's a good idea there.
Well, actually, Justin, this is where I just, especially nowadays since we have PDFs, I print the page form and only put the pages for the spells that they have in their spell book, and then that's it. They don't need any more. Or if it need be, it's like, hey, this is what it's. The problem that I have all too often is that they're trying to search through all their spells. They've gotten up to 10th level. They have 15 spells, and they're trying to figure out what the optimum one is, and it's taking them. Certain players just have analysis paralysis, and I said, okay, maybe a fighter's better for you. Maybe this is a little bit better, and that's where I'm coming into it. Is certain people are very fast. This is what I'm going to do. Well, are you sure going to? That's what I'm going to do. That's the way I am. I will look through my stuff really quickly. I may still do my little stuff, but guess what? Most combats, and this is why I like basic. This is why I like some Darksun. 2E, they did a lot of hit point bloat, and when you get that hit point bloat, combat's got a lot longer, and that's why I don't like Unearthed Arcana. Is it really increased a lot of things for the players? I said, no. You know what? We don't need you killing the monsters, and I know you've talked about this. I don't need you killing the monsters easier and faster, because guess what? Combat's not that long anyway. It's an ancient dragon has 88 hit points. It has an armor class of -2. Guess what? That ancient dragon can still do a total party kill, and the same thing with basic. Okay, the dragon has 35, 37 hit points, 32 hit points, somewhere like that. That may not seem like much, but man, for a 5th level character, if he gets enough characters in a blast, they're dead. The whole party's dead. Boom.
Yep.
And I think that's why I did that. No, I agree with RPG Grandma, but I don't. That probably was, but man, I just hate players when they go in, they get a spell, like, I can't do anything. Why not? Because I got detect magic or whatever, and they sit there twiddling their thumbs. That's why I personally, this is where I change it, and this all magic users get to select any spell that they know, but that's it. I don't like having them pre-prepare their spells. I know that's from Advancing and stuff. No, hate it. I've always hated it. But I understand why they do it. And again, Gygax, I think, played a different game than the one that I played growing up, because Gygax had 40-plus players playing in his games. I had 4. So that's, and they were the same 4 every time we played, and we would play every day. Whereas Gygax had pretty much like, hey, I got a table, who's running tonight? And you would come in and out, and that's why he had his 1-to-1 day. Okay, guess what? You're changed for 3 weeks. You have to bring in a new character during those 3 weeks. And so it's like, oh, okay. So that's what comes in there.
Well, hey, guys, I got to hit the road. This was a lot of fun. Omen, thanks for playing along. And, of course, everybody out there in TV land, really enjoyed having you guys here tonight. You kept the conversation, lively and nice and polite and friendly, and a lot of great ideas that I'm going to borrow from you guys for my upcoming campaign. And stay tuned. I'll hopefully do a video about it in the next couple of months to see who's on board. Pardon the pun, for my nautical adventure. And until next time, folks, have a great week. Enjoy your day off tomorrow if you do, in fact, have the day off. And if not, I'll probably see you guys tomorrow night doing an unboxing video from one of our friends out there in TV land. And then some more stuff during the week. I might even do a short video tomorrow morning, but we'll see. Until next time, anything you want to leave us with, Omen, before we go about Darksun?
It's great if you're tired of the typical fantasy game. Like I was saying, it's a combination of Conan, Barsoom, Mad Max, and playing in the Neolithic era. If that's what you enjoy, great. If that's what you don't enjoy, D&D has hundreds of different settings effectively. I mean, hell, even 5e has a setting where you can literally play as a donut. So anyway, you all have fun. It's called Silverplate, and it looks fun enough. I might buy the book just because if we read these things for fun. If you're not having fun, go do something else. It's a game. Have fun in your games.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's what it's all about. Having fun in this hobby and keeping it alive. So until next time, folks, happy gaming and happy trails.